I think that's everybody, and I think it's everybody on the screen almost, except I'm gonna wait. See, only Kevin McCormick from the planning board. Is that correct? Okay, so I will just introduce you, Kevin, that you're here, and we'll go to our first item. We have been talking about the 10 communities program and an electrification ordinance. We've already had a discussion of the body of the ordinance in committee. But there was a request for a waiver provision, and just in time, I see we are joined by Councilor Lyle Baker, who is the one who requested the waiver provision coming online. And that has been drafted. Meanwhile, we have a new set of regulations coming from DOER, which don't mean that we have any more time to get to decide what it is we want to do, but it does relax when we have to vote the ordinance by. It does relax when we have to meet the affordability requirement by. So we're going to discuss all of that, the process, the waiver, and then our job tonight is to set the public hearing for June, and maybe Jacqueline, you could just tell me if I have the date right. I believe it's June 14th. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And that was after scouring the calendar to see, when there was indeed an empty night. So we hope we have a public hearing on June 14th. But I'm going to say from the get-go, because the calendar has been relaxed a little bit in the regs, and I expect that Ms. Berwick and Mr. Lee will go over that. We will open the public hearing and leave it open until after we hear from DOER, which would be sometime after September 1st, that we have passed, and we may use the ordinance. So we'll leave it open till the fall of 2023. So the first item is the discussion and possible ordinance requiring electrification of all new construction and substantial renovations, item 94-23. Ms. Berwick, I believe you're on first.
Okay, thank you so much, Councilor Crossley. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right, let me quickly summarize the final version of the DOER 10 communities regulations, because they are somewhat different, as Councilor Crossley said, from the earlier versions. They're a bit confusing, but the most important points, I think, are these. First of all, the DOER, DOER is requiring that applications from communities be final by September 1 of this year. But there are two important exceptions to what they mean by final. So they are going to consider applications on a rolling basis until September 1st. We have to get our applications in by September 1st, but they don't have to be really final in two senses. One is we have to give a proposed electrification ordinance, but it doesn't have to have been finalized by the city council. And in fact, it doesn't have to be finalized until July 1 of 2024. And the other exception to what final means, is that the city doesn't have to meet the housing eligibility requirements until February of 2024. So there's more leeway in this scheme than there was originally. So we will get them, or our intention is to get them an application with everything they require by September 1st. Again, they're going to look at applications on a rolling basis, so the earlier the better. Again, we don't actually have to finalize the electrification ordinance right away. there is an advantage to a benefit to these new regulations other than the sort of relaxation of the schedule. And that is, we'll submit our draft electrification ordinance, and then DOER will say yay or nay. If they say nay, we will have more information about what they are approving. So let's say we have a waiver provision, to get right to the point of what we're going to be discussing next. Let's say we have a waiver provision in our proposed ordinance and DOER says we don't like it. Well, then at least at that point, we will know, or we will be able to determine what communities waiver provisions DOER does like. And so since DOER has been unwilling to provide us any information on what they would like to see in a waiver provision, that will be extremely useful. So I think I'll stop there on process and see if anybody has any questions. And then once we finish with process, move on to the actual waiver provision that I think we're going to be talking about. Process, any questions? Is that clear?
Yes, just there is one. I just want to say that when you say finalized by the city council, in other words, we're not going to be voting to approve it either in committee or in city council. Most likely we can, but we're most likely not going to, and we don't have to. So I see Councilor Baker has his hand up. Process.
Thank you. I guess threshold, you've said this before, but it's helpful to refresh our recollections. The electrification ordinance is not a zoning ordinance itself, right? It's an independent requirement of the city. So it doesn't go through the same, it may have a public hearing for our purposes, but it's a home rule, or is it done under authorization of state law? What I'm just trying to understand is that we don't have to treat it like a zoning ordinance. It has impact on building, but it's not part of the zoning code, or is it part? That's first threshold.
I can answer that, Madam Chair.
Yes, please, Mr. Lee.
So the electrification ordinance is going to be adopted as a general ordinance. It is not zoning. It does not have to comply with Chapter 48 notice requirements regarding public hearings. However, the DOER model rule did state that there does have to be a public hearing, and that's why there will be a public hearing as part of the process. That public hearing just has to occur and be held prior to the city adopting the ordinance and it actually going to city council.
Okay.
I don't want to, I hope that I can kind of clarify what the process is from, this night moving forward. But as Councilor Crossley noted, prior to the application being submitted, and again, the application can be submitted prior to the city actually adopting any sort of electrification ordinance. We're not looking for any city council action or even formal ZAP action. However, I think it would be helpful prior to Anne and I working to actually submit the application, getting kind of a straw vote or some sort of a blessing from ZAP as to what it is that we are proposing that's going to be submitted with the application to DOER.
So that's helpful. So basically, whatever we pass is a simple majority of those present voting whenever it's done, right? We don't have a supermajority requirement.
That's correct.
And the second question is, because this is 10 communities, are we still in competition with other people somehow?
No.
So,
there are 10 who have the blessing of the legislature, or of DOER actually, of being part of the 10. More communities can join if some of the 10 drop out. West Tisbury has already said that it is dropping out, leaving room for the next community that filed a home rule petition, which is Boston. It always strikes me as funny that Boston is replaced by Tisbury.
Good trade.
It's a really, really good trade. I want to say one other thing about the use of the word final, my use of the word final. So I said, our application has to be final to DOER by September 1, other than a final electrification ordinance and complying with the housing eligibility requirements. But I've also used final to refer to the final DOER regs. DOER, unlike, I think, well, all other agencies, that state agencies that I know about, actually has to submit regulations to the legislature, to the TUE committee, Transportation, Utilities and Energy Committee, and have TUE approve their regulations before they can be really final. So they're sort of quote final, and that's why I have quotes around the use of the word final in my memo.
Maybe we should call them semifinal, but anyway,
Well,
never mind.
if you like.
No, but that was really Councilor Princeton's province. But the question that I want to ask again on the anticipating the waiver, do we have a sense of other communities doing anything along these lines, and is there any value in communicating with them?
Could we
Okay,
wait till we get to the waiver?
yeah, why don't we
process?
wait? Because yes,
And there might be,
Because if we're not in competition with them, then you can talk across lines. That's all I'm trying to get at.
well, I think we should do what we want in terms of the waiver provision. And then if DOER doesn't like it, we'll see what they are accepting.
No, I just think when we get to that waiver provision, that seems to me might be useful if we had several people doing something the same way, they might approve it more easily, but that's another question. Okay, that's it for me.
thank you. So I just want to make one thing clear in case it wasn't clear to anybody listening, which is although our final ordinance that we're proposing to DOER is due September 1st, I believe our intention is to submit one as soon as possible so that we get a reading from DOER. We'd like to know that they're going to approve it before they're going to approve it. Okay, so that's why we're going to stay on schedule, and we'd like to stay on schedule and have open our public hearing as required, and so forth.
And if I may, DOER is also requiring a bunch of other information from us as part of our application, but I don't think it's anything that's really going to need to go before the city council. It's things like, please give us a description of how you manage data in the city, that kind of thing. So I think it's issues that, you know, the sustainability team can deal with.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Norton.
So my question is, what does the city council have to do versus what we already did? Because we already took a vote. And then what exactly would the public hearing, like what would be people be asked to comment on? Would they be asked to comment on what the ordinance language that we already voted on?
Can I address the first question, which is there are a couple of things that we know need to be done to the proposed electrification ordinance or the current version of it. One is DOER changed not in any way that we really, I think, are going to care about, but changed the definition of major renovation. So we just have to change the language in our proposed ordinance. And the other thing is we have to decide on what we want to put in by way of a waiver provision.
Okay, that's helpful. And then so the hearing will be on, what's the hearing on?
June 14th, as long as we vote to approve that tonight.
I know, but what exactly would people be commenting on at the hearing?
Madam Chair, could I kind of clarify where we are in the process? Because I think,
Sure, please.
Councilor Norton, I don't know for certain, but it sounds like what you are talking about that the city council had already voted on was a home rule petition, which kind of kicked off this entire process. So the city had to submit a home rule petition. This was before the 10 communities program even existed, right? And then because we had submitted a home rule petition previously, and that is what the city council voted on, authorized the mayor to do, we are one of the 10 communities that could take part in the program itself. Now, what DOER is requiring that's authorized by statute is this process that Ann and I have been discussing through the beginning part of this meeting. So where we are in that process is we are one of the 10 communities. Now we have to submit the application to DOER, but we have to also include a proposed ordinance of what it is we're looking for. Really, there's only two things that we're proposing that DOER is going to care about, which is the exceptions as well as the waiver process. And they're going to review those. So the to answer your question, the public hearing, what we're, I guess, seeking comment for is the city's participation in the 10 Communities program, as well as comment on the exception and waiver provisions that are going to be proposed to DOER.
Yeah,
So,
That's-
so sorry to ask a dumb question. Did the 10 Communities law sort of supersede what we voted on?
It didn't supersede it. Again, the home rule petition was the city asking the general court, the state, for the authority to, basically require electrification for these certain types of buildings, new construction, substantial renovations. What the state has done instead, because they received several similar home rule petitions, is said, we're not going to vote on these home rule petitions. We're not going to authorize them as is. Instead, in lieu of that, what we're going to do is we're going to create this new 10 Communities program, this pilot program for these 10 communities, whomever they might be, if they meet all these requirements, to authorize them in that community itself to regulate construction of buildings requiring electrification.
So I think that's really helpful. And I just want to add one further point of clarification, which is because we were one of the first 10 to support, to submit home rule petitions, we get to be one of the first 10. The legislature, that's how the legislature designed the 10 Communities program. But to make sure we stay in the 10 communities, stay approved as one of the 10, we have to submit all this material by September 1st. And by 2024, different dates in 2024, we have to have a fully approved electrification ordinance and meet the housing eligibility requirements. So it's like, yeah, we're one of the 10, but now we got to do this stuff to keep us in the 10.
Yeah,
Okay.
no, I
One
get
of
that.
the
And not
things
to be
that-
complaining, but for the rest of you, Counselor Crossley, Counselor Leary, and Ms. Berwick and I spent many hours going through the details of what our ordinance would look like. And it now looks like we spent a lot of hours, at least it got us in there. That's super helpful. Ms. Norton, if you can make sure that, or in the minutes of this, I think it'd be really helpful to have like almost exactly what Andrew just said, Mr. Lee just said in the minutes of this meeting, because that's like a lot of procedural detail that I don't know if my brain captured, but I think it'd be helpful to have out there for the public to see. And that's it. for me. Thank you.
Andrew actually submitted an email to the several of us who are putting this together tonight that has very clear, like there's 4 important dates or points or whatever. We'll
So
get
that can go into the.
I know you always
report
read the
though?
zoning and planning minutes. We try very hard to make sure.
Okay, I just want to make sure they're somewhere.
Let's see, we have a lot of hands up. I want to say one more thing, though. What if you aren't on the zoning and planning committee, you didn't spend that meeting with us a month or 6 weeks ago where we went through all sections of the ordinance. And the only reason that's important is to understand whatever the tiny or larger differences are between the model ordinance that DOER put out that we have to now follow and what we did originally. So, we can't exempt cooking, for example, and we must include commercial buildings. We were not going to include large commercial buildings in our original ordinance, thinking we were going to have a BERDO program in place by now. That's off the table. So if you see the ordinance is in the packet, you can take a look, and I'm sure it'll jump out at you, Councilor Norton, what the several differences are. And now we have to get approval for our exceptions.
Yeah, if I could just address one point. There are exemptions or exceptions. And then there are waivers, right? And tonight, I think we're just going to be talking about the waivers.
Yep.
We have in our draft ordinance several exemptions, and we don't really. Sorry?
I think
We
someone
don't-
wasn't muted. Just go ahead.
Okay, we don't really know for sure that DOER will approve those exemptions, although we believe they will. Things like outdoor heating, outdoor cooking, emergency backup, that kind of thing. So those are in our draft with the hope and some level of confidence that they will be approved. The waiver provision, we don't know what DOER will approve.
Okay, there's a bunch of hands up. So, and we do want to get to talking about the waiver. So, President Albright, then Councilor Wright.
So I'm going to be really quick. First of all, I want to say that I was so relieved to see the February 11th, 2024 date. That was really good news. But what I really wanted to say was thank you to Ms. Berwick and I think Mr. Lee and those others of you who have been involved, because we've all been so distracted with village center zoning. And just thank you so much for keeping us on track and keeping us going. That's all I wanted to say.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilor Wright.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'm sorry I was a few minutes late, so it might have been addressed. What's the definition now that we're using for substantial renovation, and what's the proposed definition? And is it, and then this also to Chair Crossley, is it the same that we're putting in the village zoning?
I don't, where does that appear in village center zoning?
I know what Council Wright is talking about, and I believe
You're talking about the specialized code and stretch code definitions, which, but go ahead, Mr. Lee.
so. To answer your first question, Council Wright, from my read of kind of what they put into the new regulation DOER, all they've done is instead of simply referencing substantial renovation in different sections of the CMRs, they've instead just defined it straight out for what it is. And it's very helpful because Anne will tell you, we spent a little bit of time,
Yeah,
cross-referencing,
Very, very helpful.
you're right, the base code and everything to find the definition, but then what they put in there is what they had already done before, but instead of simply referencing something else, they just straight out put what substantial renovation means. So that hasn't changed. Now, with regards to your second question, the substantial renovation village center, assuming it hasn't been updated in the current draft, that is a different definition. We will be working with planning to kind of rectify that and make sure there's no confusion. But with regards to electrification, we don't, it's completely separate. And we're going to make sure that there's no confusion in the village center side of it when we're finalizing that language.
But
Yeah.
just in terms of 10 communities, we should change the draft ordinance so it does the helpful thing that
Correct.
DOER does, which is use the actual language instead of just referencing the CMR.
Okay, I just want to make sure that, because we use that term in different places, it has the same definition, so it's not as confusing. Thank you, that's it.
Thank you, Councilor Wright. Councilor Leary.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to be clear that when Ms. Berwick said that we do not have to meet our housing eligibility, which is the 10% affordability related to the 40B law until February 2024. Is that correct?
Yes, February 11th.
Okay. And you also mentioned on the waiver provisions that DOER really hasn't given guidance. So we're not really sure where we stand. Is there a reason for that?
Their position, as I understand it anyway, is that it is up to cities and towns what they want to put in their ordinance with respect to waivers and exemptions, but that DOER has the final word, I guess, on whether they're consistent with DOER's overall intention. I mean, I guess I'm trying to summarize their point of view as they have not articulated it, but I think that's what's going on.
Okay. And then finally, I was last time we had a member on a different topic of the state talking to us about the 10 communities law, which I thought was very helpful. And I wanted to know if you thought there was any value in asking a member of DOER to come to our public hearing who would be available for questions. I just want to throw that out.
And do you mean when they came in to speak to us about the specialized and stretch code?
Yes, that, but we also had someone come in to talk to us about the MBTA details, didn't we? Or am I getting that mixed up? Didn't we have a member of DOER or come in? and
We've had
talk
people
to the
from
zoning-
DHCD come in to talk about
Okay.
MBTA communities. We've had people from DOER come in and talk about the specialized code and the stretch code.
Yeah.
Okay.
We have
Well,
not
both
had
those are-
anyone come in public facilities for the years before we got to a home rule petition. You brought a lot of different people in, but not really a state agency.
Okay, so those two examples that you just gave, I was mixing up my state
There's a lot to
agencies.
mix up.
I just wanted to say I found them very helpful.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if there's a role for them to play during this process. That's all I want.
Let's think about that. We haven't planned quite yet the presentation for the public hearing, although we have all these materials. I want to say one other thing, though. Councilor Leary, you brought up the date by which we have to meet the housing affordability requirements. We're supposed to be adopting MBTA community, the village center zoning or zoning that will satisfy the MBTA communities law by the end of this year. That is another way that we can meet the housing affordability requirement. So, I mean, if we don't, we're, we know what we know that that's a requirement. It's a law and we're supposed to be meeting it. So, and we're on track to do that. So that actually gave me a lot of comfort in that. I thought, well, if we don't meet the 10% affordability, because I understand we're very close to the line, and we have new census data, so we're not sure where we are now. We might be further from the line. We don't know. So with the next project passing. So, but by February of 2024, we should have met that bar.
Sure.
Anyway.
Thank All set. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. So Councilor Gentile.
Thank you. I know you got a busy evening, so I'll be brief, but I don't get a chance to get to zoning and planning very often because of finance being on the same night. So I just wanted to take this opportunity to make a comment on the general subject matter that's before you tonight. And it's the same one that the same point that I try to make every time it comes up. I fully support all of the efforts that the city is making to educate and to encourage people to electrify their buildings, whether it's a renovation or new construction. But I also worry about us mandating something and putting, as I say, all of our eggs in one basket. A week ago Sunday, there was an article in the Globe, front page. It said that as the electric grid goes green, big gaps emerge. And it talked about the difficulty that a lot of the clean energy projects are facing, especially some of the wind power projects that are out there. And it actually uses the term that it would be a monumental task to comply with the 92%, I guess, requirement of clean energy by 2030, never mind the 100% that the governor has pledged. And then today, there was an article about the LNG terminal over in Everett. And I just want to read you one paragraph. And it says that the terminal's fate could become the latest flashpoint in New England's ongoing debate about shifting away from fossil fuels. Move too slowly and we fall short of our aggressive goals to reduce carbon emissions. Move too quickly and we risk ending up in the dark or feeling the chill. Consider that natural gas heats roughly half of the homes in Massachusetts. Sure, policymakers would like electric heat pumps to replace our gas-fired furnaces, but those ultimately rely on gas too. For now, at least, about half of our region's electricity comes from natural gas-fired plants like Mystic. And that's the argument that I always hear from the other side, that we, you know, we're burning gas for electricity. So I won't even get into the spike in electric rates that everybody is seeing. And my final point is, I just want to make a little announcement, and this hopefully will make Councilor Norton happy. But just last week, I traded out my gas mower for an electric mower. And so I just thought I wanted to share that so that you all know that I am trying to do my small part. My
Appreciate
lawn
that,
mower.
Counselor Gentile. We don't have time to have a philosophical discussion tonight.
I know,
but
I just wanted to raise it
I
and I'm
know.
done.
Been raised a lot.
I'm sure that we'll hear that point of view at the public hearing. I expect that we will, but I wanted to just draw your attention over the months. Ms. Berwick has written several pieces in depth about the capacity of the grid and the relative to, and also relative to what we're proposing here, which is a fairly, it's to switch new construction, as you know, and substantial renovation, and that represents a fairly tiny fraction of the built environment as we know it today. So I'm just going to suggest we can send those pieces, those briefs or whatever I don't know what you call them, papers around again to the council, and they're based on good information and talking to the people who actually control and plan for grid capacity. Is that fairly said, Ms. Berwick?
Yes, it is. I mean, I could say a lot on this topic, obviously, but
we want to get to the waiver.
want to get to the waiver.
All right, so thank you. So would you like to describe the waiver provision as you have drafted it?
Yes. So it's just a few lines, so I'll read it. So here's a proposed waiver, and I just want to make sure everybody understands it doesn't refer to new construction, just major renovation projects. So I'm reading the draft. The city will entertain waiver requests for major renovation projects with respect to which an architect, engineer, or general contractor on the project certifies by affidavit that compliance with the requirements of the ordinance will increase the cost of the project by 150% compared to the costs of complying only with the requirements of the applicable, i.e. residential or commercial, specialized building code. So that's the language. So let me just make a couple points about that. Number one, there's no right number, right? It's basically saying a professional on the project certifies that there's going to be an increase in cost over and above complying with a specialized code if you're required to electrify. And we picked 150%. There isn't a perfect number, obviously. The alternative to picking a number is to do something like we had in our home rule petition in terms of waiver, which was something quite subjective, like imposes a hardship or makes it financially infeasible. And the home rule petition left it to ISD, to inspectional services, to make that determination. The difficulty with that seems obvious, right? It's really hard and not in the typical kind of charge to ISD. It's really hard to make that kind of determination. So instead, what we put in was an imperfect number that a building professional says it's going to be this much more expensive. And then all ISD has to do is look to see that that box was checked, that a building professional did indeed say that. Makes ISD's job very easy. Is it perfect? No, it's not perfect. I did talk with 2 other communities, and I picked them only because I have close relationships there with people I respect a lot. And one of those communities, and I can tell you who they are, Lexington, said that they have one of these subjectives imposed as a hardship criterion, although the individual I spoke with there, who I have is a close colleague, has been for many years, said he wished they hadn't written it that way. They wish they had written it the way we wrote it. And then the other community I spoke with was Aquinnah on Martha's Vineyard, again, only because I have a close relationship with the person there who's managing this. And they also, like Lexington, have a subjective, very difficult to implement standard, although Aquinnah can do it, right? How many houses does Aquinnah have? Not very many. So, and I talked to DOER about our proposal, and the informal read I got was that they don't love it. But, you know, as I think we've said earlier in this conversation, if the city council feels, if you all feel that it's preferable to have a bright line that a building professional would certify to, as opposed to having a quite difficult subjective standard, we can put it in the draft. We can get a formal read from DOER, and we will also be able to see what the other 9 communities have done and see what DOER's reaction is to those 9, and also how we feel about whatever DOER is saying is acceptable. So I'll stop there.
Thank you, Ms. Berwick. I see that Councilor Baker's hand is up. But you're muted.
Thank you. First, I just want to thank Ms. Berwick for the time, and the chair I know has spent a lot of time on this, and other councilors have been involved in this project. So I want to ask, just as a choice, generally speaking, you want to give if there's a ministerial approval, like inspectional services, a bright line makes sense. The question is there any other body, like the Zoning Board of Appeals, can grant variances from the zoning code on the basis of hardship, which is a subjective standard, but you've got a body which is used to making those kinds of judgments. In other words, you're not asking the building inspectors to make a subjective judgment. You're giving it to an alternative entity which is used to doing that. So it may be that one way to deal with the question of whether I have a bright line or not is whether there's we can give this legitimately to a body that's used to making this kind of judgment, like the Zoning Board of Appeals. That's now the city council does waivers too for parking purposes through the special permit process, but I'm not sure that's where you want to go with this on this. The other question is just in terms of the language. You said 150%. I thought at least my understanding of the intent was if it were half again is expensive. I thought you might have said it was 50% more expensive.
Yeah, you know, when I read this, I have thought about that language over and over, and then I read it again this evening preparing for this meeting, and I thought, I wonder if we meant to say 50%.
Yeah, I think you meant as the example I would say is if it costs $100,000 to comply, and then if you normally or without the provision of the new rules, and it costs you $175,000, you would be in a waiver territory, right? So I just think you want to substitute 50% for 150%.
Well, personally, I think you're right, but I'm not a decision maker here.
No, I understand, but I think if your intent was to do what I've described, then it's just a simple fix of language.
Yeah.
and I don't think we need to spend a lot of time on it, but it seemed to me that made sense to me rather than saying you have to prove it's 1.5 times more expensive, which didn't seem to me what you were really trying to get at.
Maybe we should say
so,
1.5.
Councilor Crossley had indicated some things that I thought were helpful, just to clarification, and your point is that we can find out from other communities what they're doing. I think the real issue that I was trying to be concerned about is to have some way that we can assure the public that if there is a situation that's true hardship, there is an opportunity, and this is different from the exemptions, because again, you've made the point that there are things that are exempt, and that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about major renovations. That this seems to me a useful idea, and the only question I would have is whether colleagues in the committee or otherwise feel that if we're going to do this, it's better to have a more subjective standard, but give it to a different body to do it. If you want to have a bright line standard, the question is, if somebody comes in and says, look, I'm real close to the edge, but this is a problem, we just say that's too bad, department, and they go on, and or there's some secondary mechanism. That may make it too complicated. And you indicated DOAR doesn't love it. I didn't know whether you said that meant they hated it, or they just, I mean, if they have a waiver provision, would they prefer a bright line, and
Sure.
they're just not clear?
They're not telling us.
Okay,
And, with respect to the point you're making, with which I fully agree, about, is this in a particular situation going to be a real hardship? And, I struggle with what occurs to me as I've been writing this is, how do you write a regulation that says implement it with empathy? And I don't think you can do that, but I would like to.
I think you're right, and I think and maybe part of the other part that I mentioned this earlier offline, is that as the zoning code has evolved with some illustrations and some things, that to the extent that this ordinance can have some examples as part of the legislative history or something, so that people who are trying to interpret it can understand, and with the understanding that if it turns out that there is a problem that shows up, I assume that we could amend the ordinance. The question is, does every amendment have to go back through DOAR to get approved? And that's a secondary issue. It's a matter of process. I just don't know.
If I could just add one thing that I think is in one of my memos to give a little bit of comfort on this issue, and I'm sharing your concern, Councilor Baker, but to give a little bit of comfort, the specialized code is already sufficiently stringent that I don't think we're going to see a lot of situations in which electrification is going to make people's lives a lot more burdensome. Will it ever happen? It certainly will. But is that going to be the usual state of affairs? I'm hoping no, and I don't think so.
Well, I think that's great. I just think it's good to have something for that rare occasion, and
Sure.
and maybe 50% is enough. So I'm going to stop there. I think that you make it 50%, and for the moment, it's a bright line version rather than trying to send it, because your temperature reading I get from other communities that they were trying to do a subjective standard, weren't happy because they were handing it to an administrative agency, and that's not the place the subjective standard belongs, right? It should go to a body that can make that kind of decision. So I think this is fine the way it is, unless other colleagues feel lonely enough.
I'm so glad to hear you say that, Councilor Baker, because as we understand there's nothing that can be done perfectly here. And
It's doing something, and I think that's an important step.
I agree. I've had many conversations with Ms. Berwick as well. We've gone around and around on this, and she certainly has taken a tremendous amount of time to try to come up with language that from the last time we talked about this, maybe 6 weeks ago, 8 weeks ago, it was made clear that the more subjective language was not going to play well with ISD. Of course, if we put it into law, they would just simply have to do it. But
I mean, that's like asking ISD to decide, is this an ugly building? You give that to
exactly.
the commission. Yeah, that's my.
Exactly. Well, with that, I don't see any other hands up. Our task this evening is to set a public hearing for June 14th. And again, for folks who have joined us recently, the public hearing is required by DOER. We should do it anyway because there's some education that has to happen, but we're opening the public hearing, leaving it open until the fall at the time when DOER will give us their final approval. So we'll, June 14th is an open evening. Do I have someone to make a motion?
I will,
That we set a public hearing for June 14th.
Thank you very much. We have a motion on the table. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great, terrific.
I'll just get a clarification that included in the draft ordinance for the public hearing, the whole ordinance will be on the public hearing, right? Not just the waiver. The waiver is just,
Correct.
Right.
Public hearing is for the entire ordinance.
right.
There will be a presentation. Ms. Berwick will be joining us. I hope Mr. Lee might be able to join us. I'm not sure. Yes, he's saying yes. The requirements of the program will be presented, the context within which this fits, the process and the ordinance itself. And we will advertise it widely as we have for this subject, going through the chamber and the lists of building professionals and so forth that we have in ISD and planning that Leora Silks now has, and see what people have to say, and let them understand that it's a step we're taking, not a final.
And I will give you a slightly amended proposed ordinance, right? That has the new definition of major renovations and also has this waiver language as amended to the 50%.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. And we'll come up with a language and an invitation as well to put out probably next week. So thank you, everyone. You're welcome to stay with us for our budget talks, but of course, you're not required to do that. So I just want to thank Ms. Berwick and Mr. Lee for everything you've done on this topic. Thanks so much.
Thank you all very much for your thoughts on this.
So moving right along, we've been joined by a few other folks. First, I should mention that if I can see, it's so hard to see everyone. We are joined by Chief Operating Officer Yo, who I think I neglected to mention before because I saw him right after I finished introducing people. We are joined by Councillor Andrea Downs, councillors, and I'm just going to list you: Tariq Lucas, Mark Laredo, John Oliver. I think that's it, other than those. Oh, and Julia Maliki. Other than those that I introduced before, I think that's it. We are also joined by additional members of the planning department. I saw Jennifer Kyra is here. Transportation planning director John Ostroff is here. Commissioner John Lojek is here. I'm sorry, Mr. Chickariello, your title escapes me. I think deputy commissioner, maybe there, something important like that, is here. And I think, let's see, I just want to make sure I get everyone before I see Councillor Bowman is here. And I'm going to end it there. I did also see that Peter Dornger of the planning board is here, but of course the planning board does not need to be here for the budget, but you are welcome to be here. You're always with us, and we would miss if you were not here. So we have before us the planning and development department and all of its subcategories. The community preservation Act budget and the inspectional services budget. I'm thinking we want to begin with inspectional services because I believe Laura Kreitzer is perhaps not with us yet. Am I wrong about that, Director Heath?
She can join at around 7:30. So yeah, if you could start with IST, that would be great.
Okay, love to do that. So, I should read the items. Item 1-23, submittal of the FY 2024 to FY 2028 capital improvement plan. 1-23 parens 3, submittal of the FY 24 municipal and school operating budget. And 123 parens 4, submittal of the FY 24 to 28 supplemental capital improvement plan. Of course, we don't have a CIP in any of those departments. We focus primarily on the operating budget. And Commissioner Lojek, this is your last budget presentation. And I believe there's some news in terms of who's going to be following in your footsteps. We would love for you to present the budget, but also I think everybody knows you're leaving this summer. I don't know if it's coincident with the new fiscal year, but it's close.
Well, it's exactly coincident with the new year, and it's done purposefully because of many things that go on with the budget. But that isn't why I'm retiring.
Okay.
Good evening. Thank you, Chairperson Crossley and members of Zoning and Planning. You've already made the announcement. Yes, I am indeed leaving June 30th. Will be my last official day with the city of Newton. It's been 18 very interesting years here with the city. And it's been interesting and fun and pleasurable and miserable all at the same time. So we've survived that thing. In any case, you tell me how you'd like me to proceed, but I just some highlights and to talk to you about the department. I think that I'm not making any announcement about my successor because the mayor hasn't done so. And I don't know that it's settled yet. It's been, the past year has been pretty exciting here at ISD. As you know, we have many things post-COVID that got back to relative normal, except that we changed everything about the way we do business during that end period of COVID and introducing OpenGov, or as we call it, NewGov, to the city of Newton. Our permitting system went completely online with everything we do. Joining, the building permits particularly, plumbing and gas have been going for a year, since fall of 2021. And so we do business very differently than we did just a couple of years ago. Almost all of our permitting now is done online. And if people come to the counter wanting to do a permit application, they're pointed to a kiosk in the hallway that they can input their information in if they're willing to do that. The problem for most of that is that there's a lot of uploading they have to do and payment and so on, but we at least have people at the front that teach them how to apply online, and it's streamlined things considerably. Because the way we've made these changes, the way the ISD personnel process permits has changed. It goes from a pre-vetting system by the DSAs to make sure they just have all the basic information in there, correct? To a vetting by the local inspector. Permits are all forwarded to whichever inspector district that permit's in. Sometimes it goes off different than that. People aren't in or other people take over, but that's the way it's done now. And we also receive complaints online as well, as requests for zoning enforcement all comes in online. So almost everything we're doing now is totally done within the system. Field personnel responsibilities have changed very dramatically also, in that they do all of their inspections and enter all their information on an iPad as they work around the city. This makes everything official immediately as they do their inspections and enter the information. You know, the same thing is going on with code enforcement. There's been considerable coordination now between ISD and law. It makes everything much more consistent for us. And we recently completed all the scanning up of all the old complaints and enforcement cases. The DSA's accomplished that very quickly, and all the old cases are now available that have been scanned up and are within the system. As you know, ISD has a lot of different responsibilities, pretty disparate responsibilities, as it were, from building code and zoning code, and then we're in leaf blowers now. So we've been working on that, and I think we developed a pretty good system. We have one person doing code enforcement, and it's amazing to see the change this year as Chuck Edrahai, who's our code enforcement officer for leaf blowers, he's been coming in this spring saying, a lot more compliance, Commissioner, a lot more compliance. And that doesn't mean it's perfect, but the amount of violations for non-registration and for violations has gone down considerably. And that doesn't mean for lack of effort. It's just that many more of the leaf blower people are being compliant. Again, it's not perfect, but it's far better than it was. And I think that's a big advance. We also have all the data collected from this enforcement effort. It's all in NewGov now, so we can collect that data very quickly. Something that's less, there's more along our line is the periodic inspections. It's honestly, if I had to pick one of the top 2 or 3 things that I think we've accomplished well, is the periodic inspections. And most people are completely unfamiliar with periodic inspections. And I'll be honest with you, from my information, there aren't many cities that do periodic inspections anywhere near the way we do. We have over 825 inspections to do annually at restaurants and places of business and churches, places of assembly, and all those kind of things, the schools particularly. And there are over 825 of those type of inspections that are done annually. Now that whole system is on NewGov, and we can do automatic renewals. We can do tracking of violations. Notifications are all sent right out of the system. When it's time for one category of periodic inspections to be done, you just press a button and the notifications are sent. And we collect the fees and we do the inspections. But it also makes it very easy now to figure out what is being done, what isn't being done. And as I said in my intro letter, we've discovered many properties that had fallen off the radar, as it were. They weren't applying, and we didn't know because it's very hard to keep track of that many places. So it's a very big advance. And periodic inspections are one of the very basic things in safety, in the safety in buildings and occupancy. So Jeff Johnson, who is our periodic inspector, has done a fantastic job with this. He's made a lot of advances in what we're doing and has rooted out a lot of places that had never been inspected that we didn't even know existed. It's also allowing him to find places that are being occupied, not legally, quite honestly. And, you know, we're trying to work through that and how is this happening? Why is it happening? And a lot of that has to do with religious organizations trying to make, accommodate people and make a bit of money. And it's in conflict with a lot of our laws. So we're trying to work out a way to do that better and not to upset the apple cart, but we're still responsible for doing it. Another real strange one is that we also control weights and measures in the city. So we have the weights and measures inspector. And now that is also going on to NewGov. We're working out a way to do that. NewGov is in a very expansive system, and they have an app for almost everything in there, which all keeps it under the one umbrella in the roof that we can access. And the nice part about it, we're not there yet, but reportability of all this information will be very available to all of the city officials And these kinds of things can be found very, very quickly. There's a lot of transparency involved with this system, which are really big advance over past things. Right now, we're about to start phase 3. This has been over 3 years, and now we're in the 3rd phase, and that's going to involve the clerk's office. I was recently speaking with, matter of fact, today with Deb Finnemore, and she said the Parks and Rec Commission called her up and said, we want in. So they said there's all kinds of things where they can see the benefit of them using this for rentals and for all of the fields and the scheduling and everything else. So we're going to be putting them in touch. Deb's going to lead that charge like she has with everything with OpenGov, but they're going to be able to find a better way and a much easier way for citizens and officials and everybody to deal with all the park and rec issues. So that really is a big advance. I hadn't expected it, and now it's coming on very quickly. So that we're identifying many different ways we can use OpenGov and NewGov, and it is, as the mayor said 3 years ago, or close to 3 years ago, this changes the way we do business. This changes everything for the employees of the city, and we think to a very great benefit. There's also a lot of smallish projects that are involved with this, and you don't think they're small because they involve the city council, and a lot of those ongoing ventures involve the city clerk, park and rec. And right now, the planning department is working with the clerk's office. First, we have to get the clerk online, but this is for the special permit conditions and tracking. And I think we're making good progress there. This is a pretty cumbersome undertaking to try to figure out the best way to do it. But I think we're making progress there, and pretty soon this will all be on NewGov and all be very viewable and trackable and that sort of thing. Other than that, we're not a department with many moving parts. We have people and pencils, and essentially that's about it. A few cars, but it's really the people that are important. And there's one thing I've learned over the years I've been here is it's always about the people. And I've been very fortunate over my time here to have an awful lot of very good people. Most of the very good people always seem to rise to the top, and they always seem to get it done. And I can't say enough about my staff, about the people that have been working for me for years now, the plumbers and electricians in the basement, weights and measures are in the basement, and all of the building inspectors up here. And I think the cooperation and work that they've done is truly fantastic. And we get an awful lot of compliments from contractors and people when they come in, and every once in a while a contractor will come to town and he goes, I just want to come in and visit because we do everything online now, but I really miss you guys and I really want to talk to you. And we have contractors just come in to talk. And one of the people they really want to talk to is Anthony Ciccarello, my deputy commissioner, who has done a fantastic job. And it is funny, but when you were used to so much interpersonal relationships when everything was in person, it's funny how these, well, I guess hardened, grizzled old contractors say, geez, I miss coming in and talking to you guys. And I have some questions. And so you could have called me. No, I just want to come in. I want to see you guys because I haven't seen you. And I think that's the biggest compliment we could ask for, is that they miss talking to us, and they say you find out a lot more by having a conversation in person. And that's still always available, of course. It's just not at the numbers we used to have. But, my biggest hope is that I'm leaving the department a lot better than I found it 18 years ago. And I just hope that people think that's the case and recognize that the case and take advantage of what we do and what we are doing. So I don't know. I don't think the numbers haven't changed a whole lot over the years. They bump up slightly every year. Naturally, everything does. But if anyone want to ask any questions, they certainly may.
Thank you, Commissioner Wojcik, and thank you for your 18 years of professional service. I just want to say for the record, you have a budget this year, proposed FY 2024 budget of $2,071,646, which is an increase of 2.25% only after last year. And you have one position that you're deferring for FY 24, a development services associate. Maybe you would, for everyone's edification, explain what that person does and why you are deferring it.
Well, this is being done purposefully. Now, when we first started with OpenGov, one of my thoughts was we had this open position. We had two actually one time. We had this open position, and I had said to the mayor and others that NewGov's going to change everything, and it's going to reduce the need for that kind of work. And I said to them, I think instead of us filling that position and realizing that this is sort of superfluous, that this person doesn't have enough work to do, or we don't have enough stuff for them to do on the payroll, the first year I said, let's defer the position. Let's hold off on filling the position and see how it goes. We could always, it's in the budget, we could always do it. But we found that we didn't need that position at that time. And then when the budget came around this year, they asked me, how did I feel about it? I said, well, I don't want to lose the position, but I said we could certainly continue to defer it because, quite honestly, two women up front, Julie and Kristen, are fantastic, and Deb backs them up from my administrative assistant position, and they get everything done, and they do it in a great way. And in addition to which, they're scanning property files every single day when they have extra time because of the lack of people coming to the counter to bother them. So, they're scanning our property records, and we're making great progress there.
Great. Well, thank you so much. Again, thank you for your service. And I just want to say, this job is unique among the job of commissioners for the different city departments. It's a job that requires toughness at the same time, that, we all care about our community and so forth. So it's kind of a tough love position. You got to know what the rules are. You draw red lines, but you have to do it in a way that, solves a lot of problems in the field. Anyway, I appreciate that, and I appreciate your leadership in the department.
Thank you.
So, Councilors Baker, Wright, Albright.
So I'm going to add my thanks to the commissioner, and I ran into our chairman of the board of trustees of my university the other night, Bob Lamb, who said he enjoyed it. He's a high school classmate of yours. He's profiling. Commissioner, I didn't expect anything other than that. It's nice to hear from somebody else too. The questions I have are sort of in small buckets, or maybe, but the answers may be big. First, the way you described it, I'd almost say your sentence is up, but I don't think that's what you meant to say. But you're leaving, and I think you're doing a wonderful job, and I'm sorry to see you go. But that does mean there's going to be a hole in the department if your role, or if someone moves up, and again, you've not in the mayor's has to make a call about who becomes acting after July 1st. Obviously, that means that you're going to be under strength, and how I would be interested to know from maybe not your call, but from the administration, how we're going to respond to that, because the summer is a busy time as it is, even with vacations on top of that. So that's one piece. So let me just run down these questions. Second, I think I'm glad to see Mr. Edderhy continuing. I hope he will continue, at least it appears to be in the budget for another cycle. And there's still some people that are scofflaws, but I think he's making an impact, and I think it's important. And you indicated in NewGov, and I think it's important that our colleagues understand, who may not know, that Mr. Yo has been working with the whole process to make sure that if a citizen files a complaint on NewGov, that's protected. In other words, making the information available otherwise is just like any complaint is protected from public disclosure under normal circumstances. So people don't feel that if they report something, they're going to get in a difficult situation. And I think it's important that we have that opportunity. So I want to applaud that. The question again of there's more and more activity going on in the city, and while you've got some economies of scale and automation in effect and through NewGov, I just want to make sure the department has the ability to respond to sicknesses, vacations, and even indeed additional demand for inspectors because of the kind of nature and season of the work that you have to do. And we just talked about potentially adding another responsibility to your office, which is to figure out the rare case a waiver needs to be done for electrification. So, I mean, and here comes the recreation department asking for help. So it seems that your office is getting more and more work to do, even if it gets more and more efficient. So I just want to raise that question as well. So you can perhaps hold the answers if you'd like and let other people ask their questions, but I want to make sure that you've got the resources to do what you need to do. But just to say we appreciate, and certainly I have, the quality of effort and service that you put in, and it's going to leave a big hole in that office.
Well,
Councilor Baker,
thank
do you
you,
want-
thank you, Counselor. I can answer those very quickly and briefly. I'm certain that Anthony Ciccarello will be the acting commissioner until a permanent decision has been made. So I'm certain that that's what's going to happen. He stands in for me now, as he did last week when I was out. So there won't be a void there for now, and I have every confidence in the world. He's always done a great job when I'm not here, so or standing in my stead. So I have no doubt that the council and the city should be confident that that he can deal with that. Yes, and the complaints, as long as the law department tells us they are and can remain, complaints will always remain anonymous. For 18 years now, I've said that. We get complaints. We've never disclosed a name. The only way I say that they're ever going to get a name disclosed on who complained is if they take us to court. And as you know, the judges are not apt to give that out, especially if what we're enforcing or doing is legitimate. Because it isn't the complainant against the violator, it's the city. So they just make us aware of it. We've never had one have to be disclosed, and we don't think we ever will. So it would have to be a foolishness, a specious, and we don't those complaints we pretty much let go by. There is, in terms of filling in, it's not something we've ever had a problem with. We have a very good system for filling in and for taking care of, we have 19 employees, and everyone has to go on vacation at some point or another, or is out sick. Our people have always stepped up. We have 3 electrical, 3 plumbing, all the building inspectors. And we have people like Jeff Johnson, who's the periodic inspector. And if those are things that don't have to be done today or tomorrow necessarily. So Jeff often goes out in the field. Right now, Andy Mavrelis, the code enforcement guy, can step in and do inspections or counter duty or any of that kind of stuff. So everybody is very adept at taking care of whatever it comes up. So we've never had a really big problem. We pass around a clipboard that has requests on it and all that kind of stuff. And all those inspections are taken care of. So I don't think any of that will change. And certainly they're going to backfill whatever position is left vacant. In terms of, I made my thoughts on, subjectiveness of decisions and waivers on electrification very clear. So I don't think I necessarily have to speak to that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner and Councilor Baker. Next, Councilor Wright, and then President Albright.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Commissioner, for your 18 years of service. We really appreciate it. I'm just looking through here. I just have a few questions. And you were kind of addressing this with Counselor Baker, and you're saying the most challenging areas of field work are resident complaints, including job site misbehavior, illegal rentals, unkept property, and noise. Do you have some ideas on how to address it or to make it easier?
Well, I mean, those are just generally, well, they fall into the bucket of complaints. We're very lucky. We have a code enforcement officer, Andy Mavrelis, who takes literally no time at all to get out to sites when people register a complaint. He receives them directly, and he will formulate a plan. If it's not today, maybe tomorrow, depending what the complaint is.
Where does one register a complaint?
Online, we have the, request for zoning enforcement, and it goes to all sorts of complaints. And so they come in online, and, Andy will often come to me, or he'll go to Anthony, and he'll ask about how he should deal with it if need be. But in general, he deals with it himself. He's very, very efficient. He's great at searching things out. And there are very, very few of these complaints that aren't addressed, usually within 24 or 48 hours, or at least he's made an initial visit. So, that's the way we've been dealing with that. And we've got some lawsuits coming up, and most of the complaints are put down pretty quickly. Because of Andy's ability to do research and things. I mean, I don't know how he does it. He finds people that we couldn't find and that kind of thing. He's really kind of a detective. And he recently found someone in Washington, D.C. that was trying to hide from us. And now they're going to get served. So, it took a long time, but he found them.
Commissioner, if I could add on to that answer. Yes, we all were looking for this person in Washington, D.C., the derelict home. I forgot what ward it's in, but I will add that Commissioner Lojek has also worked with several other departments to reactivate a departmental task force that tackles some of the more thorny properties that have multiple problems going on. So HHS, planning, sometimes fire, sometimes police, whether it's social work or a health code violation. So, sometimes these properties unfortunately have multiple problems. So this task force is discussing selected properties as well. So that's something that has also been reactivated and is at work. So I thought I'd mention that, Commissioner. You forgot that one.
I'm sorry, I didn't mention the Joint Code Enforcement Task Force.
Joint Code, yes, Joint Code Enforcement.
Off to a pretty good start, and it's a great way to put emphasis on a particular property that, we're having issues with trying to get compliance. So when they get more than one department or multiple complaints, the Joint Code Enforcement Task Force really does make a big difference. And Andy is leading that challenge right now, and getting people in line, and it's working out pretty well so far.
Yeah, a magistrate or a judge will certainly listen if there's better, I think, if there's multiple departments at work on a property.
Yep.
A question on the NewGov, and I do use that looking at properties. I don't see the Historic Commission paperwork or their information, their finding all the time. It's sometimes up there, but it's not always.
I'm sorry, you don't find what?
From the Newton Historic Commission, their findings, to tear down a house or whatever. Sometimes it's up on NewGov, but sometimes it's not.
Well, it's not in my department, so I don't know what they're doing, but.
Barney, do you want to comment, or should we look into that and get back? Or?
Yeah, I can. And I know Jennifer's here as well. It's sometimes a timing question, but Jennifer, you want to handle that?
Yeah, so the decision should always be there. So if there are some specific examples, please send them my way and let me look into it.
Okay, yeah, I had one just, the house is almost done and it's not there. So I wanted to find out. So I'll send that your way.
Okay, great. Yeah, and some of it is a transfer from the old system. So
that's
we're
what
still
I thought,
working.
because some things pop up, they weren't there a month ago and now they're there. And
Yeah, so we're still working on getting all of the old files that were never in the old system into NewGov, but the things from when we went live last year moving forward should all be there. But happy to look into anything you're having trouble finding.
Okay, and just one more quick questions. About how many demos are we having a year? Are we still around 100? I know COVID may have affected it a little
Well,
bit.
100, 120 every year.
Okay. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Ray.
Anthony, do you have a better answer than that?
John, you're right on at about 100, 120,
Okay.
pretty much every year.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. President Albright and then Counselor Danberg.
Thank you very much. So I can't believe it's been 18 years. It's a long time, but it was a short time.
Yeah.
So I'll
It's
add
a
my.
long time.
I'm so glad that we were thoughtful and took our time and chose the right software.
Yes.
Could have gone in a different direction, and I'm so glad it went in this direction. It's great.
And thank you, President Albright, for your help with that.
Yeah, it's great. I have a question. I was glad to hear that you mentioned special permits and the conditions. And I'm sure you'll eventually, those are actually into this, they're going in the system now, aren't they? I think they are.
I believe so.
Yeah,
But
so,
planning is putting them in right now, and we have to change that to be the clerk's office,
yes, good.
because that's the official entry point for all special permits.
Okay,
Technically, it's not legitimate unless they're the ones that put it in the system.
so one question is, do you think you'll be able to go back and enter in all the old conditions from old special permits? Will somebody be able to do that?
I mean, it depends on how far back you want to go. I don't know. That's a lot of digging. I've had that discussion with the previous city clerk, and they just thought that was going to be incredibly daunting. I think if you went back a certain amount of years, it certainly could be done. But if you're going to go back, forever, you could be at it forever. And
Commissioner, if I think you've said before that if somebody touches a property that has an old special permit, we're going to make sure that all of the old special permits are put back into the system. So if there's 5 special permits going back 20 years on a property, we're going to make sure that if somebody comes back for a 6th, that all 6 of them then are rolled into something that's on NewGov.
That's something we've done before. We only want one controlling document. We don't want, the 67, the 73, the 85, and the 92. We want the 2023 special permit being total control of the property. And when we get to that point, everything will be much easier. But the biggest problem is, dealing with people that come in for a permit, maybe a new homeowner, they don't even know that their property had a special permit. Although that would be kind of something that their lawyer should have told them. But the problem is even the city clerk doesn't have those records right available to them. And that's when David said, this is a daunting task. But I think it's something that really has to be done, because you're giving out permits to people on property they shouldn't be doing things on according to their original special permit. So it is something that's very, very important. And hopefully it will be pursued the way it should be as we get the clerk's office online.
Yeah, I hope that it's hard because nobody has enough time to go back and do things from the past, but I really think it's important for the city to do that. So I hope we'll talk to the clerk about that and see if she can take that on, maybe with some extra help. And I don't have any other questions about your budget, but I do want to thank you for all those years of service.
Well, thank you, President Albright.
Okay, thank you, Counselor Danberg and then Downs.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And yes, I want to add my thank you to everyone else's for your 18 years. I was just thinking that you came in shortly after Counselor Albright and I came in. It was right afterward. I feel that my whole tenure as a city councilor has been working with you as the commissioner, and it's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
I also thank you for working with the city and President Albright in instituting NewGov. You certainly in this way and in many ways are leaving the city in better shape in ISD than it was when you founded it. Certainly is much easier to navigate now that we've got these things online. I also wanted to give kudos to Andy Mavrelis, because I have had numerous dealings with him over the years. He is a very hard worker, and he has always been a fast responder. He instantly gets back when we get to him with a question. One question, I have two short questions. If we need to beef up staff, Councilor Baker has brought up the fact that certainly while we've got an acting commissioner in Anthony Ciccarello, who will be a very capable commissioner after you have left, during that time alone, there will be somewhat, I guess you could term it, a hole. Are we able to step up to the plate and take care of that? If we need to beef up staff anywhere, where would that be?
Well, seeing as that I'm leaving, it's really not my question, but I mean, if Anthony want to comment on it, I mean, we've always had people, you know, my staff has always been willing to move over. You know, guys will go in and do plans exam. Guys will go and do enforcement. And, you know, yeah, okay, there'll be a bit of a shuffling for a short period of time as you decide where is that hole going to be. It's certainly not going to be at the commissioner level. It's probably not going to be at the deputy commissioner level. Zoning enforcement has always been that spot, and we, you know, other people can step in there a little bit. The problem being is that you have H-Plan, which is the commissioner, deputy commissioner, and zoning enforcement, and then everyone else are union employees. We've never had a problem with that, with guys volunteering to step in and help out. So I think that's going to be okay. And it would just be, how fast can you get someone to apply for the downline job if that's the one that ends up being vacated?
Okay.
You know, certainly it isn't going to be my job that's vacated. It isn't going to be Anthony's job that's vacated. It's going to be down the line where people have moved up, which is the way it should be. I mean, when they talk, the administration has talked about succession planning. We took that very seriously.
Yeah, and Commissioner, we're never going to replace you, that is for sure. But we will.
Well, I think so.
We will move very quickly to fill whatever position is open in the department as soon as possible. So, and I think we might know how to reach you, although you're threatening to travel quite a bit. We do have consultants we can tap into as well if need be, but I think the team is strong enough and deep enough and flexible enough that we'll be able to get through until we hire a new team member.
I have every confidence that will be the case.
Thank you. And in the year since we've gone live with NewGov, I assume that we've worked backwards. We're doing all of the current, inputting all of the current stuff and then working backwards as we can. How far back are we now?
Well, everything in NewGov from 2005 forward, because that was all on a former system that was able to be uploaded. So all of those permits from 2005 are all in the system. Is that right, Anthony?
Yeah. Yes, John.
From Community
2005,
Plus, all
whatever
that
was in
stuff is up.
Community Plus for zoning enforcement and permits issued.
Yeah. And then everything prior to that, as I said, the DSAs in front, there's a box of files right next to their desk all day, every day. When they have a moment, they bring up, so all of those older, now that's all going to be stuff that is on paper that they scan in and then it's viewable. It's not going to be the same kind of permits you look at that are modern. But all those things every day, more and more of them go into the system.
So priority is given to properties that are requesting a special permit, and you look in its history to see what's in the past, and you input those so that those are there. And then if there is time and energy after that, you go to you go farther back from 05. Is that how it works?
Well, what we do is all of the new ones, of course, are go directly into NewGov. Everything from 05 and until we started NewGov was on a former, we're all electronic, we're on a former computer system, Community Plus. Those were all transferred by OpenGov into our system. So everything from 2005 forward is all electronic. Okay, that's all online for that can be viewed. Everything prior to 2005, which were paper files, they are being scanned up property file by property file, and we'll have all of them, and it will be more or less like a viewable file. You can look back at the history at that address.
Wonderful. Thank you. Well, we'll see if you ever get to Councilor Baker's house. I think it's the second oldest house in the city.
Well, it's not by age, it's by what's your address.
Good. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Godspeed.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And last hand up is Counselor Downs.
Thank you, Chair, and John, thank you also for all your years with the city of Newton. And I'm going to venture into dangerous territory and mention that I knew you when you were working for another municipality.
We shall not name.
We shall not name, nor how far. I was a baby then. I'm going to cover my tracks here. Couple of little things. Counselor Baker noted that your office is busier and busier. But it sounds like with NewGov, you're actually freeing up desk time. And from your financial and operating highlights, it looks like permits are down year over year this year. Is that correct, or are you indeed busier and busier with say leaf blower enforcement and things?
Well, we're busy with a lot of things. I mean, if you went back to 2019, we weren't doing leaf blowers. We didn't have weights and measures. In terms of our total volume of work, we're probably down a little bit. Permits have been down this year. They're not as many as they have been in years past. In terms of getting it done, the nice thing about the new system is that it makes it possible to do far more than you could do before. So, I think, we still get the phone calls, we still get the emails, we still get the people at the counter with some questions, not like it used to be, but certainly we get them. So, the volume of work is still pretty far up there. COVID brought us a spike in terms of complaints, and that hasn't abated. The complaints are still coming. So, we have to deal with that, and that reaches, for the local inspector, the code enforcement guy, to Anthony, to myself. So, we certainly don't need more work, but as permits, make no bones about it, the numbers don't lie. The permits are off, but understand that FY23 is as of March.
Right.
So we still have April, May, and June to go, and I think we'll probably get pretty close to what we did last year.
And just to clarify, when you say complaints, is that because now you have leaf blowers, which I am sure spiked during COVID when everyone started, were trapped in their houses. But do you also mean zoning enforcement complaints and things like that, or?
Yes, well,
Yeah.
it's things like, I mean, the fact is that when people were relegated to their homes during COVID, their habits changed, and they had never been home all day, and the lot next door is being built upon. They had never listened to construction noise or people or parking because they were gone. So I think people have gotten in the habit of complaining about those sorts of things. We didn't get those complaints before because they weren't there. So, I mean, I just think that the world has changed in terms of how people operate. And, you know, listen, construction of a house hasn't changed much, except for the modulars, but, you know, it hasn't changed much. So it's still noisy, it's still dusty, it's still messy. Our job then is to try to clean those things up.
Right, right. And we had that experience when we were trying to work from home a couple of weeks ago, and the neighbors decided to destroy their concrete staircase and replace it, or their concrete patio and replace it with a concrete staircase. And there was concrete dust and jackhammer noise going on pretty much all day. And I thought, is there anything we can do about that? And I realized, no, this is just not that unusual. It just doesn't usually happen in the backyard. So changing the subject, you were talking about the Joint Code Enforcement Task Force. Do you, so I assume you work with things like hoarding and other issues around a property as well, right?
Well, the Joint Code Enforcement Task Force was purposely brought up because, say, we don't have anything to do with hoarding, but often hoarding leads to other problems, as you know. Whether it be one person recently, we find out that they haven't had water for 3 years. Those kinds of things. The hoarding leads to a lot of fires, so we deal with the fire department on those kinds of issues. The nice part is that we've now tapped into the police and senior services because they have social workers, and so does the health department. So try to figure out what is the best way to deal with these people when we have these code enforcement issues. It might be a construction issue. It might be an occupancy issue. It might be a hoarding issue. It might be, a unkept place sort of issue. It could be noise. It could be a lot of things. But that's why we have all of the departments get together and talk about a particular case and figure out what do they have that can help bring that enforcement to an end. And as Jonathan said earlier, the fact of the matter is that if you show up in court, and it was my experience, is why I started this when I was back in a different municipality. If you show up in court with 4 different departments that have a problem with a property, you're going to get attention. If you show up just as the code enforcement guy, they tell you you're on second call. I'll see you at 9 o'clock, 11 o'clock, or whatever it is. So that was the whole point, because I was tired of sitting in courtrooms and not getting called. I guess it was a little bit of selfishness. I didn't want to be sitting in courtrooms. So this way it gets brought to the fore much more quickly if the fire department's there, the police department's there, the city solicitor is there. The court you get much more attention very quickly.
So if I'm right, you're working with not just fire inspectors, but with the social worker at the police department and Amanda Hendrickson and so on. Okay, thank you.
Well, that's the first thing. That's the first thing we ask about. We try to figure out, is the person we're dealing with, are they familiar with them at the senior center or at health or the police department? Are you familiar with these people? And often the answer is yes. And we say, well, then can you explain to us what the issues may be from your perspective? And then we try to work on it from there. But it's the way to go about it, because oftentimes, as you know, when things get messy, there usually is some sort of a social or a mental issue, and we want to be sensitive to that.
Well, when you have an intractable property issue, usually there's more than, when one thing goes, it tends to be a cascading effect. Well, thank you. That's very interesting. And I'm glad I tuned in because this, of course, also overlaps with public safety.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay, we have two more folks. Counselor Krinsman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to quickly add my appreciation to Commissioner Wojcik for his excellent years of service. Truly appreciate all the collaboration we've gotten from your department, from you, the excellent work that you've done.
Thank you.
My wife is a realtor, and she often speaks about how excellent it is to work with your department when she's helping people close permits on their homes. So thank you for that.
Oh, thank you.
I know that for at least a few years, the council was sort of urging additional assistance for your department and some code enforcement officers. And I think you really did a great job at bringing in people, especially with the leaf blower ordinance. And the goal, I think, has always been compliance. And I think, to your credit, at least if what you've said at the beginning is true, we're really starting to see that. And that's a big testament to you, as well as the work that Councilor Baker has done. But I thank you for your collaboration with that. I don't have any questions, and so, Madam Chair, if, at the appropriate time, if you want a motion, I'm happy to move for a straw vote in support of the proposed budget.
Thank you. I was counting on you to do that, but I have.
I'm here for you.
Counselor Maliki.
Thank you. And Mr. Wojcik, happy retirement. I just retired myself from my day job, so it's a quite pleasant feeling. I did have a question, curious about what's going on with the short-term rental enforcement. Last time my Councilor Wright and I were poking around the Airbnb map, it was not too hard to find sort of, there was a person with multiple properties owned being rented as Airbnbs who clearly was not living in all of them. And I recall a property that was advertising more than the maximum number of rooms or beds. And how able are you to sort of, check on things every so often, or are you only able to respond to complaints about whether it's excessive rooms or excessive time rented or other types of the violations of the ordinance?
Anthony, do you want to speak to that?
Sure, John. I mean, we haven't been getting a lot of those calls recently, but we do take them as they come in, and we've been trying to sort through the short-term rental complaints as they come in. Council.
Have any violations or tickets or whatever been issued?
Quite honestly, we have a full-time code enforcement guy, Andy Mavrelis. He's got a lot on his plate right now with what he's doing. We've got a couple of very intractable situations in different projects, but he does work the list from the state and the short-term rentals, and then the Airbnbs and all that kind of stuff. And quite honestly, the law is kind of confusing, but we mostly count on complaints. But I've spoken to him about that, and I think in the future you're going to see a program to try to figure out how to deal with this. The problem is, if it isn't a problem for people, then we tend not to look at it. So, if people have complaints about that, I'll certainly bring it, and Anthony will bring it to Andy's attention and see if some sort of a program for reviewing who's registered and who isn't, get it up to snuff.
Commissioner, I think it's fair to say that right after the ordinance was completed, pretty soon thereafter, COVID hit. And so the need, Airbnb sort of disappeared for a few years, and is then very slowly has been resuming. So it is something we will need to take another look at in terms of resources. And certainly if you know of any egregious cases, please let us know. File, go through and do the zoning code enforcement button on NewGov and let us know about it. And Andy certainly will put that on his plate.
So you have a state list of the registrations that you can check things against to see if they have at least done that. Okay, thank you. And I did hear Mr. Mavrelis do presentation, I guess you would call it, at the ZBA for some kind of strange multiple rooming house or something like that. And he was very effective, I will say. Thank you.
Yeah, he is very, very effective.
So, thank you, everyone. I have a short question, and maybe one more question. The quick one is, because the stretch code was issued so suddenly in January, and it was a big leap forward, I know the department had to do some catch up, and you've always had a checklist for contractors and architects on the energy requirements of a building. Have you been able to put one together?
Anthony?
Yeah, not currently. We're still trying to deal with the homeowners and the contractors as far as getting them squared away. Most of the permits that are coming for review across my desk all have typically being sent back to them, telling them that they need to comply with the stretch code, even at this point. So it's a long road. I'm sure we'll get something together shortly, hopefully before Commissioner Wojcik leaves. But other than that, it's a bit of a long road with this. A lot of questions.
I'm aware of that, and I think it would be, as I'm sure you agree, hugely helpful for the people coming in for the first time. And since we're online now more than we are at the counter, it used to be if you put a flyer out of the counter, here's this thing changed, poster, whatever, that a lot of people would see it. Now, how do people know that the code has changed, for example, or anything else?
Typically, developers and contractors, it's through the NewGov system. They'll submit a set of plans and a permit application for a new house or a remodel greater than 1,000 square feet, and without the proper EV charger in the garage, or the ERV, which should be on the plan, and the solar array. And I have to, talk with them and basically comment back and forth with them and telling them what they need to have on their plan in order for me to issue a building permit.
Right. So the NewGov system tells them what they're missing.
I tell them what they're missing.
Okay, so that's the reason why a checklist would be helpful. And I guess what I'm asking poorly is, can that be part of the NewGov system where you're confronted first with a checklist?
Yep. Well,
Actually, in the NewGov system, we do have forms and ordinances that you can read, and maybe something that we could do is actually put a posting up there. What would be required there, and maybe even on the ISD webpage.
Anthony has always been great at putting together lists for people to, from demo to everything else. So I'm sure when he finds a moment, he'll put together one for the new stretch code.
Okay, well, that's what I was wondering about, is how you find that moment with everything else that's going on. And here's the big one. So we're going to go on to the planning department budget, and we know that a lot of work is going to happen internally this summer to refine the proposed village center ordinances, MBTA community stuff, and so on. And we, the planning department, but all of us really need your input. I understand that Mr. Ceccarello has been meeting with planning on a somewhat regular basis, but I'm just hoping you have that time this summer to really scrutinize, because it's going to come down to the wire in the fall, right? So we want to hear from you. Yeah, this works. I'm hoping you have enough people to do that, because it's time very sensitive. So I don't expect an answer. I just wanted to impress that point. It sort of goes along with everybody else worrying that maybe you don't have enough staff, although I hear very much how the NewGov system and the laptops that the inspectors have out on the sites has streamlined the work, because that makes their job much more efficient. But thank you, thank you, thank you. And at this point, I will take that motion from Counselor Krinsman to,
I would move that we approve the budget of $2,071,646.
thank you so much. There's a motion on the table. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great. Thank you so much. Have a good rest of your evening, unless you want to stay and hear the rest. Really appreciate it. It's been great working with both of you, actually. And John, I think I'll see you once more at least before June 31st. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, on to the planning department, or do we want to do CPA next?
CPA is ready.
Okay, that must mean that, and of course, I can't see everybody at once, that Ms. Kreitzer is here. And let me just get to it. For some reason, they're not right together. There it is. Ms. Kreitzer, you have a budget this year of $5,620,000 and $342. Would you like to present your summary?
Yes, I have a quick presentation if I can share my screen.
Sure. Jacqueline?
It's just been enabled for you.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Can you see that one? See it now? Okay. Yeah, so FY24 budget. Just quickly to go over the CPA funds are made up of the 1% local tax revenue, which is matched with the state CPA trust fund from the prior fiscal year. So this year's funds we're drawing from FY23 match of 38.5%. So this year we're expecting just over $4 million in a local surcharge. Our anticipated or estimated match right now is at 20%, which is $796,154. It's very possible that we'll do better than 20%, but there are some, the real estate market is not what it has been in the last few years. So it's also unlikely that we'll make the 38.5% from last year, or we did even better in FY22. So this is our estimate right now, and I feel very confident we'll have at least this much money to work with next year. The unrestricted fund balance of $703,910 is the additional state match that we received from FY22 that's above what we had originally budgeted for. And that's how we get to the $5,620,342 that's in our budget. And this is our proposed expenditures, program administration, debt service for Webster Woods. This $132,000 is what's over and above the 10% open space reserve. So for Webster Woods, until we pay off Webster Woods, the open space reserve goes directly to pay off the debt service, and then anything additional comes out of the main CPA budget. And our 10% minimum for community housing, historic resources, and open space is anticipated to be $562,034, which leaves us with general reserve usable for any of those three uses or for recreation of just over $3.6 million. And this is a breakdown of the program administration budget. We set aside some money to do signage, to do printing, less and less money for postage every year now that we do so much online, computers, and so forth. And lastly, I just want to share with you, this is our finances at a glance that the CPA program puts together. We usually update this on a monthly basis. This is available on our website, and it gives you a quick summary of where we stand at any point in time. This is including how much we've recommended for funding. This year, we're at $6.7 million in FY23 that we've recommended for funding to date. and how much we have left to spend. So this is something the CPA program came up with to give us a good sense, a working sense of how much we have at any point in time to spend on new projects. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kreitzer. Are there any questions? I see no hands up.
Oh.
Councilor Larry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Ms. Kritzer, for your presentation. I just wanted to comment on the good work, and I was noticing in your outcomes, one of them is to promote awareness of the Newton CPA program, which I remember we talked about that last budget season, and how the CPA, when I think it was envisioned by the legislature for members of the community to work on municipal city projects, and not just have it used as sort of extra money for city projects, which at times are certainly appropriate, but it's not, in my opinion, not truly in the spirit of the law, which was to really more of a grassroots effort for local community organizations and neighborhood improvements, which is at the heart of the Community Preservation Act. So I would love to see a sign on every CPA project, especially more visible ones like the cemetery on Center Street, that shows that it's funded by the CPA and gives a little information about the CPA and how people could apply to it. So I'm glad to see that. What else was it? Additional tools. I think that was my main one. There was something else I wanted to say, but I lost it. I might raise my hand again a little bit later if I remember it. But I think the CPA has been doing great work, and I'm particularly happy with the development of the housing trust, and so that we can commit more money for affordable housing. That's another project I'm really happy to see. So thank you for your work.
Thank you, Councilor Larry. You may raise your hand again if you wish.
Okay.
Councilor Danberg and then Wright.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will be brief. Thank you very much, Laura, for all of the wonderful work you have done. I want to say how important I think it is that that we continue to do these projects that would have no other source of funding were it not for CPA. We have purchased Webster Woods and saved those 200 or so acres in perpetuity for the city. The Housing Trust is going to provide additional units of housing. We have funded the Allen House for the Newton Cultural Alliance, the Grace Church Tower, and many, many other worthwhile projects. I only have one quick question. You mentioned, I think, that there was an $8,400 or something charge for dues and subscriptions. I can understand what the subscriptions are, but what are the dues? What do we pay in dues?
So our primary one is to the Community Preservation Coalition, which is a statewide CPA organization. And they base the amount of annual dues is based on the size of the community and your size of your CPA program. But that is really a critical, I think it's one of our most important resources. They're there at any time. We can call if we have questions. They work directly with the legislature on a regular basis. They're the ones who have managed to advocate for additional funding to go into the state trust fund, which in the past has given us about $20 million from surplus state funds to boost the trust fund in the past and increase our match. So they're really a wonderful organization that's helped promote CPA throughout the community.
I'm glad we have that resource available to us. Thank you very much. That's all.
Thank you, Councilor Danberg. Councilor Wright.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think I might have missed it or I'm not understanding. Why did the debt service go down this year for Webster Woods?
So the debt service went down. So it varies slightly every year, but the more every year it changes slightly. And we have a bigger chart of it that I'm happy to share. So what it and also changes because every year, you know, as generally our funds go up slightly each year. And so the 10% allocated to open space goes up slightly every year. And so that means we need to take less out of the general reserve fund. So the 562,000 that we're allocating to as a 10% allocation to community housing, open space, and historic resource, for open space, that will go to pay debt service. And on top of that, we'll pay the 130. So as the debt service goes down slightly over time, more and more of that payment will come directly out of the open space reserve fund, and we'll have to take less and less of that out of the general pot of CPA funds.
Okay. And it's not much, but what do you use consultants for? It's only 20,000.
So in the past, we've used consultants to review large scale affordable housing projects, or as a consultant to take a look at larger plans. It's not something that we've done really since I've been working with the CPAC, but it's something that we have as an option in case we need that help. We could also, if we wanted if the CPC wanted to initiate a study or develop guidelines, that's something we could look at having.
Okay. And then final question is in the controller summary, the expenses went down 11%.
I'm sorry, could you say that again?
Under the controller summary, which is the first one in the details, the expenses there went down 11%. I was wondering why that drop.
The first, okay.
Went from 4,692,000 to 4,180,000.
And that's in the comptrollers?
Yeah, summary.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I don't have that one right from, and that's for this year?
Yeah.
I'll have to take a look at that. I don't have that.
I was just wondering what was going on from 2023 to 2024. Okay, that's it.
Okay.
Council Wright, I wonder if somebody.
Oh, there's the community housing reserve. That's what I see.
Oh, that would, right. So that would take
wait.
1.9 million right out. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, I was just wondering if you're looking at the top line under comptroller summary.
Yeah.
Number 52 expenses and then 59 which I guess is transfer to other fund. It looks like the money, for whatever reason, that used to be under transfer to other fund, which I guess is the CPA funds that are coming in, then switched over to the expense line for some unknown reason. I don't know if the COO or somebody from finance can.
No, it looks, if you look on the
explain
next page, though, it goes the community housing, I think it's reserve. You had 556K in 2023 and you have nothing in 2024. So that went away.
Oh, for the housing reserve?
Yeah.
So it's just a matter that we've used it. So in past years, we haven't always used the 10%.
Okay.
But in this year, we did.
Okay.
So.
That's the reason. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Leary.
Thank you. I remembered what I was going to say. I also just wanted to comment on Councilor Danberg's about the CPC, because she might not remember that I worked for the Community Preservation Coalition for 2 years and I lobbied the State House to get that increase in the state match. But it's amazing how many questions communities have about the implementation of the law and how helpful the coalition was in getting more communities to actually participate. And that was, so I just wanted to add that because I learned a lot when I was there. My question actually was on outcome 4, Ms. Kreitzer, you're talking about monitoring CPA projects, which I think is an important thing to think about. We had a wonderful project, but also a problematic project in Newton Corner with Farlow Park and the pond there. And essentially, I think that it was underfunded. And there were also some unforeseen problems that increased the costs quite a bit. And now we have to look for a big chunk of money for the pond basin because it's leaking. And there's also a pump problem. And I think probably part of it was the way that it was managed as well. But I just want to comment that I hope we can also learn from some of the projects that didn't work out as well as we thought, and how important it is for us to be carefully estimate the costs of these projects and where the other money will be coming from too, because as you know, we always want an additional match. And usually if the community organization works on raising more money as well. And I think there were some mishaps in this case, and at some point, maybe I'd like to chat with you about that project and how we could do better in the future. Overall, our projects are outstanding and work really well, but once in a while we have something that didn't go the way we wanted. And unfortunately, I think I still will say Farlow Park is the most beautiful park in Newton, and certainly it is the oldest park. And it was designed by the same landscape architect that created the Boston Public Garden. So it really is lovely. But I did have some frustration with the way that was going over the last few years, and it's still not resolved. So.
And I'd be happy to talk with you about that. One of the things that I've been really lucky to work with Olivia James and our previous community organizer was to try to do more outreach to smaller organizations, as you had mentioned earlier. And so we did have an information meeting earlier in the month, reaching out to smaller organizations, more community organizations and neighborhood groups. But I had heard from some of the local park, I can't remember if it was friends of the park or just people who are concerned that the basin was having problems and they might need to be looking for sources of funds.
Well,
Exactly.
I'll just very quickly say Commissioner Banks is working on a game plan for the pond, and we are, as you know, working on assembling different sources of funding from the state and others to resolve that and do it right this time.
Yeah, I know Councilor Greenberg had also been working hard to get.
Councilor Greenberg's been all over this, so yeah.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Bowman.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
So just going back to the comment that Councilor Leary was making earlier about a desire to see, and it was one of the goals of CPC to see that people understand more about what CPC is and more projects that are really truly coming from the community. Wondered if you've ever looked into participatory budgeting. This
So
concept.
That's something Nevena Philippa Wegner, who I'm sure you all
Yes.
remember, who unfortunately left just before, just when I was getting a chance to really work with her on things. She mentioned, something I talked with her about. And she done so much outreach that was really helpful in helping us learn where to go.
One way I could see this really playing out, and it really ties into, I talked to students. In fact, I talked to a group of them today, and I have 2 more meetings set up to talk to students in the coming week who are very interested in seeing certain things happen in the city. Frequently bike lanes, that's when they usually reach out to me, but they reach out to me for other reasons. And in communities like Cambridge who do this, young people have an opportunity to put forward a project, to vote on it, I think starting at the age of 12. And it could be a really exciting way to engage community, a small amount of money, and put it out there as hey, we have $10,000 and we're looking for project ideas, and we're going to give the community an opportunity to vote on this. I just think it could be worth thinking about it a little bit. I know that you have limited opportunities and whatever, but maybe this is something, somebody could help with that. But I just think it could be a really fun, exciting way for people to, especially young folks, to feel like that they're more engaged in what's happening in the city and have more of a voice and can direct some of this money. So just a thought. I'd be happy to talk further about this offline.
That'd be great. And I think we would love to see, we've seen so many huge projects lately, having smaller scale. There's no reason we can't do small scale projects. Just in recent history, we've done very large ones. And part of our outreach efforts lately have been to, try to make people understand that we could do small neighborhood projects or bike lanes or, other recreational opportunities that don't have to be multi-million-dollar projects, but could have a big impact on the community.
Okay, thanks. I have one question. I'm looking at the new proposals that you're reviewing.
Mhm.
And maybe it's not a question, maybe it's more of a comment and a request. The 2.1 million in historic resource funds to complete the exterior restoration work for the Warren House.
Mhm.
That that struck me because I know the building well. I remember when we put $1 million something into it early on in CPA, because when it was first renovated for housing, there wasn't enough money to do everything that needed to be done. And to put another 2 million into it, I'm sure the building needs work. I have no, not questioning that. What I hope, and maybe you could just bring this back to the committee to think about, is that building deserves sort of a top to bottom assessment of need. It's a very difficult building. It's a bit tortured inside. And my best guess, just superficially even, is that it's going to need a lot of work over the next 10, 20 years. And I think we have to ask a question about, where our resources, what's the real priority for these kinds of precious dollars. And, without any other specific housing proposals on the table at this moment in time, but there could be any day, that's all. It's like a word of caution. I don't know what you do about the building. It needs, if it needs the work and it's not whole and it's leaking or whatever is happening over there. But there's just a but. I'm not saying I'm against it. I'm not saying I'm for it. I just think it's a building that has never had sort of a top to bottom physical assessment. An honest, thorough one. So that's it. That's all from me. Do I have a motion to approve the CPA budget, for a straw vote to approve the CPA budget?
I'll make a motion to approve the CPA budget.
Thank you, Councillor
And that-
Leary. We have a motion on the table. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Carries unanimously. Thank you so much. Thank you, Lara,
Thank you.
for joining us this evening, and you don't need to stick around unless you want to. And
Madam Chair, Ms. Kreitzer had an assistant with her for a brief moment, and we didn't get introduced to who that was.
I'm sorry.
My assistant has fled the room at the moment, and I need to go put her to bed. So
Okay, yes, okay,
Yeah.
very good. Oh, well, thank you for joining us, Lara.
thank you. Have a good night.
Right, so yep, bye-bye. Okay, on to the Planning and Development Department, and I believe we're gonna have one presentation for Planning and Development, Community Housing, and Community Housing. Is that correct, Director Heath?
We have one presentation and it's a brief one.
Okay, we like brief. It is proposed as a $2,643,054 budget for FY 2024, which is an overall increase of 3.85%. Director Heath, are you starting us off?
Yes, I am. Good evening. Councilor Crossley, fellow councilors, I'm here this evening along with Deputy Director Jennifer Kyra, Director of Transportation Josh Ostroff, to answer questions regarding the Planning Department's FY24 budget request. I'd also like to acknowledge and recognize the efforts of both Perry Rosenfield and Connor Roach for their patience and expertise throughout the process as well. So I have a brief presentation with your indulgence.
Please go ahead.
Okay. Let's go to the next one. Thank you. So this committee is especially familiar with the work that we do in terms of zoning. We plan to continue that effort. I don't have the current efforts we're undertaking with respect to village centers and the MBTA compliance because you're quite familiar with that effort. But I did want to note some areas that we plan to get to in the next fiscal year. And that is looking at our commercial corridors. I think we've always kind of had this next in line in terms of where we go next. And that would be Needham Street, parts of Route 9, parts of Washington Street. We're also in the midst of an interesting effort on California Street that concerns kind of legacy industrial zoning that we have areas throughout the city that traditionally have been industrial zoned, and that zoning needs a refresh in terms of what we would like to see, how we might encourage certain other commercial uses. John Sisson, who's our Director of Economic Development, is very keen on us preserving our commercial tax base. And one of the ways we hope to do that is to refashion some of these industrial zoning pieces that we have throughout the city to make them more attractive for business development. One that's been on our radar screen for some time now, and we just haven't been able to get to it because of the workload we have at ZAP, is looking at the residential site and grading requirements. I know this is a big issue for many of the councilors. And lastly, in this regard, we're also looking at kind of one-off pieces that we've tackled on occasion. One that comes to mind that we're looking closely at is this idea of brewing and various brew pubs and the ability to have bottling and or canning on site. Many communities have made changes to their zoning ordinance to allow this kind of a use because it's desirable in terms of attracting folks and is a very popular business approach. Next, please. This is a big year for transportation initiatives. Josh is on the call this evening and can speak to the specifics of a lot of these, but it's very high on our agenda. You're all familiar with efforts to upgrade the commuter rail. I think key to that is continued advocacy on our part, which again, the administration and Josh can talk to you more about. But we're also on the lookout for any type of a grant opportunity in that regard. We've been somewhat successful in securing some grants. We're going to continue to look for opportunities. Some of the councilors were involved in a site walk just the other day on the portion of Washington Street where we have a pilot that is in full gear at this point. So it's going to be a big year for that, getting that moving and then moving into the next phase of that, which will be implementation. Also, most of the councilors, I think, are familiar with the Albemarle project, which just passed in a really important phase, and next phase will be implementation. And Josh has a whole plan for not only the implementation piece, but also the training with respect to the back-end parking and keeping track of the metrics associated with that project. So we have a good understanding of what's happening. We're also well underway with our bike pedestrian master plan, and in the midst of gathering data from the community on that, and we're getting an awful lot of feedback on that. The MassDOT Commonwealth Ave carriageway project, another big year for that in terms of securing everything that needs to be secured for that project to move forward. So we're heavily involved in that aspect of things and are really looking forward to the construction implementation phase of that. And lastly, the Christina Street Bridge crossing, we have a real opportunity here that we didn't anticipate having funds available to actually tackle this right away, but it appears that the stars are aligning a little bit in terms of funds available to actually make that happen. So we're actively pursuing that with all of the parties involved. Next. Just quickly, in some of the other areas the department's involved with, the Walker Center Affordable Housing Feasibility Study, we just signed a contract with a consultant to get underway with that project. So we hope to conclude that in the next fiscal year so that we're ready to take the next phase of that and get those properties in a condition to be able to provide affordable housing. We're working closely with our partners in the Sustainability Office on affordable housing energy retrofits. We've met with 3 of the biggest multifamily affordable housing providers in the city to first undertake a consulting effort to identify how we can prepare them for energy retrofits by undertaking studies to identify what the actual improvements that need to be made out there are. There seems to be a good amount of funds available in various pots to undertake these improvements, but in order to access those, you need to know what it is you're requesting. So we're working closely on that. We are also kicking off a partnership with Empath on the Newton Economic Mobility Program. I think we've talked about that before. We're in the process now of setting up a recruitment with the folks at Empath. We're working closely with our colleagues in HHS on that, so that program will also kick off this year. In the conservation area, where in addition to maintaining what we have, we're also looking to undertake some improvements this year at the various conservation areas. Next. I think that's it. So I am happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Director Heath, and welcome Ms. Kyra and also Mr. Ostroff. Director Ostroff are both here. President Albright, you're first.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you for your presentation and all the work that you do for us as a city and a committee. The Walker project, I was wondering, are we partnering with someone? Is the city partnering with someone on that?
Yes, much the way that we approach the Armory, we've hired a consulting firm. In this case, it's Weston and Sampson, to help us understand kind of the physical layout of the properties and suggest ways in which we might reconfigure some of the properties into the most appropriate affordable housing. Also, as part of that, we're going to undertake a financial feasibility piece of it to understand what the best financial arrangement might be in terms of affordable housing, and come up with some recommendations. So that's where we are with that.
So who owns that property now?
We do. We do. Yeah.
All right. Well, I look forward to seeing how that one develops. The conservation area that you said you were doing some increasing, or was it infrastructure work? Or,
yes.
Yeah. So I immediately went to see, because that's always a point of contention during the community of the whole, where some of us want to put more money in, and I see that you've preempted us by putting in double the money in expenses, which is good, but is that going to be enough to do what you need to do with whatever infrastructure things you have in mind?
So I anticipated this question from Councilor Baker, but I'm happy to respond to you as well. So yes, we have intentionally provided more money in the maintenance arena here. The normal allocation is $50,000, 25% from the general operating budget and 25% via the Newton Commonwealth golf course. So we found that the maintenance budget, which averages around $50,000 a year, we've been doing fine with that. We'd like to do better than that and have funds available to undertake more maintenance as needed. Also, we're buttressed by the fact that we have a fairly substantial capital budget at this point in time of, I think it's $62,000 to undertake capital projects. So I know Jonathan has been close to this issue as well. So
And some of that is money remaining from last year. So I think Jennifer has and Ellen have quite, they have a good contractor now. They have a whole long list of projects to be done, and I think they have the resources to get it done. So I think we doubled this. We added 25,000 to this budget 2 or 3 years ago, maybe 4 years ago now. So far, so good.
Okay, sounds good. Sounds promising. I just one other question about the carriageway project. So, and this is sort of an odd question, but and maybe it's a request for help. I'm on the off-leash dog advisory committee, and I think the commissioner of Parks and Rec has been, I'll say, shy to get involved with that Norm Vega project because it doesn't belong to Parks and Rec, and rather it belongs to the Conservation Commission. And I know the Conservation Commission was actually agreeable to having an off-leash dog area there. And I know that the carriageway project planned for that. They even put parking in for it. So I guess my request is maybe you could help bridge the gap, so to speak, between Parks and Rec and Conservation, and encourage them to talk to each other more about that wonderful area that's so unused right now and just sitting there waiting to be fixed up, and get some encouragement that might be a really good idea to have an off-leash park over there. So that's my, I guess.
We hear you. I know that there was some estimates that it was going to be quite costly to do that for accessibility reasons, but and then our friends at the hotel decided to lock up their parking lot. So Jennifer and Commissioner Banks do work together on a bunch of things. So I'll remind them, and you can remind them or Commissioner Banks of this. I know there's some other off-leash areas that I know she's also pursuing with you and the rest of the team. So I'll remind her about this.
Yeah, and don't be put. There was an RFP that went out, and some people bid on it really high. And I think the off-leash dog people would be happy just to have another area to go to with a pathway. They don't need to have the bells and whistles. So don't be put off by the price that came in. We can do something a lot simpler than that.
Okay.
Okay. And my last comment was that thank you, Mr. Ostroff, for arranging the site visit on the Washington Street project. I think it was worthwhile, useful, heard good things. I think the consultants heard some good things. So I look forward to that project as it evolves.
Thank you for being there.
Thank you, President Albright. Councilor Leary, you're next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've always astounded about the amount of work that the planning department does. It's amazing how much we've been able to do particularly this year, under a difficult year. I wanted to mention that the California Street project, which is in Ward 1, I'm very excited about, and looking forward to opportunities there, including potentially maybe a new market or a space for a farmer's market, as well as looking to increase our capacity for more manufacturing and commercial uses in that area. So I've been attending those meetings. We're also really happy to see that the bike and pedestrian master plan is underway. I was wondering if we have a goal for the number of miles of bike lanes that we're going to do, say, in the next 5 years.
Thank you for that question, Councillor. Less a goal at this point. I think that we'll have a public meeting on the 13th of June at 7 o'clock, and I will we'll work on trying to identify some metrics that might be more accessible. I look at it as, how can we get the projects that are most ripe, most fundable, that would return the biggest benefit to the community, and bring in outside dollars to help fund them. And not just for bike lanes, to make the city more walkable and accessible for people with mobility limitations. So we are really trying to first take the temperature of what the community really needs and wants, and then prioritize projects that would fit within that. So I don't really have it, not approaching it the way you suggest, but I think that would make it more accessible. So.
Okay. But I think it would be important to have a goal once you get more, maybe you need to gather more data.
Yes, no, that's great input. Thank you for that.
Okay, and then I'm just going to switch gears and discuss the part about maintaining and improving our conservation lands, which, as you know, is near and dear to my heart. I spend quite a bit of time in both Cold Spring Park and the Hampton Park, and I'd love to see more coordination with both Parks and Recreation and the friend groups of the park. To increase the communication about park uses, and also have some input on decisions on how they're managed. And in particular, I see a great deal of invasive plants taking over our parks. And even though there's the good work from the Newton conservators that do go into these areas, but they just can't keep up with it. And there's huge stands of Japanese knotweed in all our parks, often very visible and getting bigger every year. And of course, garlic mustard. And it also degrades our wildlife habitat as well. And I would really like to see more effort put on that, and more planting pollinator gardens and more native plants. I think in this era of climate change and all the stresses on our natural world, that it's really important for us to think about that more. And also, it's no mow May, and I think we mow way too much, and that we should have areas of not only our parks, but parts of city-owned land where it might be appropriate to put in more either pollinator gardens, or just not do as much mowing. I think that would be a way to save some money. $50,000 a year is still very little money. I know it's double what we used to do, but it's still very inadequate for all the work that we need for our parks. And I would also like to see more effort to get both state and private grants. And then finally, this is something I would also like to see, is our aqueduct trails have better signage and access to them. Particularly, there's on Walnut Street, there's a path, kind of a steep path up to the aqueduct trail on one side of Walnut Street. And it's difficult for older people to actually get there. It would need a little bit of steps is what we need in some of these areas, so that people can actually get on the aqueducts and walk. It's more important than ever for people to get outdoors and be able to walk. And I don't think we've taken full advantage of our, the MWRA has given access to all communities, all the MWRA communities on aqueducts. And a lot of them are much further ahead than we are in encouraging access and putting in appropriate signage. and in some case stairs, which help eliminate erosion as well as make it safer for people to walk. So that's just my 2 cents. And otherwise, I think the planning department does great work, and I'm very appreciative of all their hard work.
Thank you, Councillor Leary. Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want a clarification. President Albright asked about the Walker Center, but I thought we just own a few of the buildings, the houses per se, but the large building, I thought one of the developers is buying.
That's correct. Yeah, I believe it's four buildings that we own.
Okay. My next thing is you have 200,000 in consultants, and in the different departments, it's the same as last year. It just seems like we're spending a lot more than 200,000 in consultants, and I was wondering what the full cost is, or is that really the full cost? You know, this year we're adding California Street. We're doing a lot more, you know, on VC zoning, plus there's other consultants that you discussed. So what is the true cost of consultants?
So the California Street project is grant funded from the state.
Okay.
So we've been successful in the last number of years at getting grant funds from the state. We actually generally underspend the consulting line. This year we're on track to spend about let's see, we have about 100K for UTIL. We had a housing and community development needs assessment that we had to undertake for HUD. That was around 100K as well. And then we had a matching historic preservation survey grant of about $16,000.
So that's 216, and you said we're underspending?
Yep. So we generally carry over some funds from the previous year that go unused in the consulting line.
Okay. Oh, so the HUD is from the US government, that 100K?
Nope. That's a requirement that we had to meet a HUD requirement. We'll get reimbursed for a portion of that from HUD when they approve our plan.
Okay, but it doesn't seem like you just told me you spend more than what you have in the budget from this past year.
Right. So we have carryover funds from previous years that are unspent.
Okay.
I'm happy to kind of go through that with you if you want offline.
Okay. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. Councillor Baker, you're next, then Councillor Lucas.
Thanks. I just want to go back to Mr. Yo's comment and also Mr. Heath about the conservation fund, because I was a little puzzled. I was delighted to see the maintenance account go up by 25, but the capital account has gone down by 25. So it looks like we're pretty much in terms of funding at a wash. And my annual refrain is that, you know, we look at Parks and Rec, which has obviously active fields to take care of, but conservation is something that I know benefits from the kind of work that Ms. Steele can do. And there are a number of us who participated in an invasive weed pull and even Newton Surge on some conservation land. So I know the condition of it. And I just want to ask Mr. Yo to explain a little bit about how whether we're really getting ahead of the game or we're just standing still in terms of our funding, even if we're moving it from one pot to another.
Well, unfortunately, you know, we did try to get additional funding for the city through the override, and that failed, unfortunately. Thank you to those of you who supported it. What we did this year is we moved the money to make it more flexible because the work that Ms. Steele has been doing can be fitted. It's probably best term to be maintenance of as opposed to capital projects. So I think Maureen Lemieux felt that it was better to put it into that category so that it can be used as most flexible. There is some carry forward, I think, from last year. There's the money from the golf course. And we are also going to be, as Councilor Leary was suggesting, looking for grant funding for other kinds of projects as well. So we're going to use a variety of sources of funds. I believe we still have some ARPA funds that we had allocated to conservation trail work that we still will be using. So we're going to use a variety of funds to get the work done. But I do hear what you and Councilor Leary are saying. There is definitely more work to be done. You know, Ms. Steele has been working with her contractor to really get a grasp of what the magnitude of that is. So we will keep working away at this, and to the degree we can increase things in the future, we will.
Well, I'm sure Councilor Leary's view about the CPA is supposedly to not necessarily substitute for public funding in certain things, but to the extent that you do find there is a project that, because CPA funds really can't be used for operating to the extent that it's a capital nature, I would encourage you and Ms. Steele to think about that. And certainly the ARPA funds are in help, and I thoroughly understand the impact of the override as well.
The other thing I'll quickly mention is that we are working with our state representatives, in particular with Balzer, did get some money into the House version of the state budget for some trail work in our conservation areas. So we have a number of conservation areas that have either need new trails or renovated trails. So those are also important things that we will be hopefully working on if we can get some of that funds.
Right, and as you know better than anybody, I suspect because of your prior work in this field, we have the Webster Conservation Area, not just Webster Woods, but the one down near Hammond Pond is actually state land. We're in the situation where that whole green space is partially state land and partially city land, and it makes no sense to try and maintain the trail on the Newton side and have it sort of end in a dead end when people, you know, literally can't tell the boundary. You wouldn't know it without knowing. So that's the kind of planning I think that complementary work with the state legislature and Representative Balzer can really be an aid, especially if they can allocate it to sort of match what the city's doing. So, but you're on top of it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Baker. Councilor Lucas and then Downs.
Thank you, Madam Chair. How you doing, Director Heath?
I'm doing well. Thank you, Councilor Lucas.
I think the last time when we were here a year ago, I think it was Game 5 of the Eastern Conference Finals. This year, I don't know if we're going to see 5 games. So, sorry. I was in the budget book. You're increasing staffing by 1 part-time staff member. Can you just explain why that is, and what the position is?
Yes, I can. So that is Nicole Friedman, the previous director of transportation planning. She's on at 12 hours a week to assist with our transportation efforts. She has been remarkably successful in garnering transportation grants, sustainability grants, even economic development grants from the state. As I mentioned previously, it's somewhat of a rich environment these days, the transportation sector in terms of grants. So Nicole is particularly adept at getting those grants and been successful in many. And we have a number in our sights to assist with us in the future.
Okay, so she's no longer doing her former job. That's now with Mr. Ostroff, right?
That's correct. Yeah, there's kind of been a division of duties, and she really is assigned to kind of that sector. She's also working on the blue bikes and Numo, and as I said before, sustainability efforts, EV chargers, etc. So that's
okay. Go on. I thought you were done.
No, that's it.
So would that be, so she is no longer the Director of Transportation Planning, she's the Transportation Coordinator.
Correct.
It's a change in title.
That's right.
She left the DOT and is now the TC, if we stick with initials.
Correct.
Okay, following up on what Councilor Wright had to say about the consulting fees and the 200,000. You said that you're allowed to carry over funds from the previous year, and that's why you're slightly over the 200,000. Just wondering, why is it that those leftover funds from the previous year don't go to free cash and they stay with the planning department?
Well, it's the good graces of CFO Maureen Lemieux that allows us to carry over a certain amount of funds every year. It's not always the full amount, but we generally underspend the allocation that we have been given every year. So it's not additional funds that we're requesting.
Yeah.
So we make a request at the end of every fiscal year based upon whatever balance we have left, and try to anticipate what we're going to need for the following year, and try to be as conservative as we can with the request. And sometimes we're fortunate to be able to carry over funds.
Yeah, I think the best way to explain it, Counselor, is that this is a lumpy kind of expenditure. You have contracts with consultants that, you know, take the go up and down in terms of cost, and so carrying forward some funds that are unused into the next year can help you deal with. Largely, we've been keeping this account steady. We know we've had considerable amount of consultant work to help us through major planning efforts. So, you know, that's we've carried forward a little money to help even it out so that we don't have to ask for additional funds or ask for budget increases.
Thank you. Are there any other departments other than planning that are allowed to carry over funds and not go to?
There are some occasional funds that do that. Yeah.
Okay, all right. I'm not going to follow up on that now, but I will probably later on, just to get a better idea of why they don't go to free cash.
Yeah, all salary money goes to free cash. So at the end of the year, unless you've reallocated it through the council. So there is a lot that goes to free cash. Most goes to free cash.
Got it. Okay.
We're mostly salaries.
Okay, thanks. Let's see, I had one more question. The planning department budget has $1,000 in refreshment meals. And the previous 4 years, it was 0. But this year it's 1,000. Just, is there like a big party coming up, or?
No, there isn't, and it's been a while since we've carried the line item because of COVID. There was a point in time when we occasionally did provide food for community outreach events. I don't know if that's going to come back. I'd like to see it come back. Generally, again, that's a line item that we're very conservative with. If we don't use the money, we don't use the money. It doesn't come back the previous year. So I like to have funds in that line item to cover unforeseen events. But again, they're rare, but they would be in terms of an outreach event where we were trying to get people and we might bring in some food or whatever.
Drive-in food, is that what you're saying, for like a meeting at the library or at City Hall?
Sometimes it works, yes.
It does work.
Yeah.
It does
Yeah.
work.
Yeah.
You're not wrong.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll leave it at that. Thank you for the answers, Director Heath and Mr.
You're
Yo.
welcome.
Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Lucas. Councilor Downs.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I wanted to again here express my appreciation for the planning department and all its different facets and the professionalism and expertise that you provide in helping us to look toward our best futures Newton is something I sincerely appreciate and appreciate year over year. I'm going to align myself with Councilor Leary and Councilor Baker on the conservation areas and the need to start to get a handle on invasives control. This is also something that aligns with our goals to do something along the lines of preserving our ecosystem. We are seeing fewer birds as a result of fewer bugs, which is in part as a result of fewer things that those animals eat. And, you know, we can only go down this path so long before we start to impact our own food supply. And we should, like we do with energy, do our part there. And I am still so pleased that Ms. Friedman is remaining, at least in her grant writing capacity with the city. I think she's worth every penny. In fact, she's raised her salary many, many times over. I think in the, what was it, tens of millions of dollars last year alone. So bravo to the planning department for keeping her on in this important role. It gives all of us a little bit more wiggle room at a time when we otherwise would not have that wiggle aspect. And if you'll indulge me, Chair, I would just like to get an idea of outcome 2 and kind of what the planning department is foreseeing in terms of village center parking dynamics and actionable recommendations there. This is, as we know, a perennial complaint, and anytime we want to change anything, it's like, but don't touch the parking. So let's, if we could get a preview of that and how that will be staffed and financed.
So this is a conversation we've been having with our counterparts at DPW, and Josh has been involved recently, and John Sisson as well, about looking at a village center and undertaking a parking analysis with targeted recommendations that could be transferable to other village centers. And in order to do the kinds of analyses that we want to undertake, likely we'd have to hire a consultant to assist with that effort, and then take the results of that and apply it appropriately across the board. Does that sound about right, Josh? Okay.
Yeah, I know we've worked on Newton Center.
We have.
And we've made some tweaks around the edges. I don't think anyone thinks Newton Center is solved yet. I don't think any of these things, frankly, is ever really solved. It's always going to take tweaking and adjusting. So we might want to also think about adding some in-house capacity to do those things ourselves and to work kind of the way that ISD is doing its, Joint Code Enforcement Task Force. This is a knotty problem. It's going to need DPW planning, the transportation division, the economic development folks, the folks who interface with our commercial centers and our residents, and probably some other departments, just to figure out and through the departments to figure out how to make this work better. But I'm glad you're starting to look at it. I would love to have a deeper discussion about where the funding is going to both come from and go to, and also how you're going to incorporate enforcement and the police, because that's going to be important, as well as some wayfinding. I remember Candace Havens had some quite detailed recommendations that were a little above our price point on parking wayfinding, but I think as we do some changes, that's going to become even more important for visitors to our village centers so that they work properly. And it would be a good overlay a good thing to start working on, as we're also changing village center zoning and removing parking requirements and mandates. That does it for me, Chair. I'm looking forward to another year with this department.
Well, seeing no hands up, I'll just make a few comments. First, I'd like to give my thanks. I feel like I eat, sleep, and drink zoning. I think I dream about it. The work of the staff this year with you, Teal, but it has just been phenomenal. And I think this is as good a time as any to say thank you. I know you are working hard and long hours. It seems to me sometimes you have meetings all day long every day, and I wonder how you get the work done. But you do. And you know, we're a demanding bunch, this city council, and but you have set us on a course, and you have been very disciplined in staying focused on the goals and the objectives, and how dividing and explaining, assimilating, and going back again. It's been a very iterative process. It's a huge amount of work, and I just really appreciate the attention you're giving to it. So Ms. Kyra, Director Heath, and of course Zachary Lamel in particular, the three of you, and I really do appreciate that. You've kept us on our toes with a lot of information, a lot to think about, and more to come. And of course, the first half of fiscal 2024 is still about zoning redesign for village centers and meeting the MBTA community's requirements, if not half, nearly half. I hope we don't take it all the way to the last hour in our last meeting of December. Try to do better than that. Model ourselves after some other communities that got it out the door. I am thrilled to hear, this is the first time I have heard that Nicole Friedman is coming back part-time. I'll echo the sentiments.
So she has been with us.
Oh, I didn't even know.
Yes,
I didn't
yeah,
even know that.
yeah.
I thought
She never left us.
She never left. Yeah, exactly.
So, so secret, I thought she had found another job. So.
Oh, she has a full-time job, but she is.
She has a different full-time job.
She has a different
Yes.
full-time job, but no, you know her. She can do things.
Doesn't sleep.
Yeah.
So thank you for that. I'm glad you're able to bring her back in. That's terrific. Some tiny questions. I think the affordable housing energy retrofits. I'd be interested to know, doesn't have to be now, what projects those are for. And I was a little unclear about how the department is proceeding. It sounds like you need commercial grade energy audits, and I don't know if it's more than that, but it's a good idea, and there is a lot of money out there, and I hope that you're successful in getting it. Any more to say about that briefly?
Yeah, I'm happy, and Jonathan can weigh in as well. This is part of the ARPA funds were set aside for affordable housing and affordable housing retrofits. So Bill Ferguson has organized energy consultants to work with the Newton Housing Authority, Newton Community Development Foundation, and Two Life Communities to work on their biggest buildings that they have, over 20,000 square feet, to prepare an overview of the energy usage and suggestions on how they could get to a net zero, where they might find resources to accomplish this, basically give them a roadmap.
Okay, great.
So-
I'm glad Bill Ferguson is involved, and good. That's always a good thing. And then I didn't hear really much more. I think Councilor Leary brought it up in the context of CPA. Maybe we should just invite the Affordable Housing Trust members back into committee, but I didn't hear too much about, you know, where they are and where they're going. And I guess it's too soon to, you know, they got their startup money a year ago at, you know, from CPC, and too soon maybe for them to be requesting a budget allocation. Any more to say about the trust and projections for fiscal 24?
Yeah, that's right. In terms of timing, Laura didn't address it, but I think the anticipation is that sometime shortly after the fiscal year, where they'll be looking for a new allocation of CPC funds that would come before the council. They'd like to present an update to the ZAP committee in terms of their activities. They're just kind of getting underway. They're reviewing their first funding application that you referenced earlier from NCDF for the Warren House right now.
Okay, I wondered, I mean, are they being consulted for things like a point of view on the Walker project?
Not yet. They're coming up to speed on things like the village center zoning and other kinds of housing projects, including the Walker Center, but they're still relatively new.
Okay, is it just, I mean, there's such a wealth of talent there, and it seems like we have had some things coming down the pike that where they could be extremely helpful in terms of the breadth of knowledge they comprise, you know, and what you described as what we need to do to understand our options with the Walker project. Some of it's physical, but some of it is about, you know, managing resources and funding sources and things like that, which they're quite expert at. So just putting that out there. Okay, I see, Councilor Danberg, you have your hand up again? Okay, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Just one quick question about the Walker Center. Do we have a timeline for the consultant project on the Walker Center?
They've just started the work, so we're hoping we can accelerate it and be close to completion sometime in early 2024, so that we're well positioned to undertake the next phase.
Good. Thank you.
Sure.
And to wrap it up, I just wanted to say also thank you to you, Mr. Heath, and to all of the very hardworking members of your staff. It's been said before, and I'll say it again. I don't know how you get your work done. You have so much on your plate and meetings all day. I know that all of you burn the candle at both ends and well into the night on many occasions.
Because you see us at ZAP.
Because I see you. Yes. The planning, the DPW takes care of the operations day to day and the infrastructure of our city. And the planning department, as your name says, plans for the future, which we absolutely have to do in order to continue to function as a city. And I have all confidence that with your wonderful staff, we will make this zoning reform work, make the city work as a community, and am confident that together we can get this done. So thank you so much for all that you do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Danberg and President Albright.
So I'll make a motion, but I want to do one more thank you. You know, when we all went to the new website, we lost our table way of displaying what goes on in a committee. You know, it was very organized, agenda, you know, date, agenda, meeting report, audio links, and we fretted for months about that, and we finally gave up until I discovered that that's how the Historical Commission keeps their page. It's all in a beautiful table. And thank you to Heather, who gave Carol and I a training session last week on how to do that. And so we will get our tables back in each of our committee structures. So that is a special thank you for your staff to do that for us. So, and is there a number that I have to use? I'll move a straw vote for approval, and you have the number too.
Thank you. I was just gonna ask you to do that. All right then. There are no further hands up. We have a motion to approve by straw vote the planning department budget. And I'll say it one more time. I can get that number. $2,643,054. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? We are just barely over
Thank you.
3 hours this evening. Thank you all so much, and enjoy the rest of the night.
Okay, good night.
Good night.
Not all.